that he will prove himself to be better than his brothers by bringing glory to their family. However, his father quickly reminds him of Duke Ryan's crushing defeat. But Miso seems indifferent, and confidently states that this time is different. Timothy has provided them with snow powder, a weapon just as powerful as the one used by the fourth prince. He also mentions hearing rumors that Lord Mead E has something even stronger in reserve. Miso declares that the battle will begin soon. With that, the fool of a son departs, hoping to bring glory to his family, unlike his brother Ferlin, who is now a puppet of the fourth prince. The father can't help but feel disappointment. No matter how strong Timothy or his armies may be, they're no match for Roland. The old bearded man learned this firsthand when he met Prince Roland recently. Roland is an intelligent and compassionate leader, unlike the rest. The old man reflects on his own family, Ferlin, Eileen, and Lady Agatha, all of whom live in Border Town. He orders his butler to leave for Border Town immediately and report this news to the prince. He doesn't care how the butler gets there, he just wants the message delivered as soon as possible. A few days later, we meet an angry Roland, who has just received a distressing message from Ambassador Petrov, who is currently stationed at Longsong Fortress. Apparently, the four families of the western region have rebelled, and Roland isn't sure who is backing them up. Knight Carter explains that these families must have been planning this for a long time. The aristocrats likely have a new patron or leader, one who has united them for the first time. Iron Axe suggests that it must be Timothy backing the rebellion, but Prince Roland is also certain that it wouldn't be surprising if the church is involved instead. Looking at the Dragon Cliffs, Roland notes that an attack on the western region is only a matter of time. Carter explains that, according to the letter they received, the enemy seems to have significant firepower. Roland points out that both the church and Timothy are not strangers to snow powder, but it will still take time before it becomes practical for them. Roland is confused. Even if they have a powerful patron, there's still the issue of distance. Border Town is the closest to Longsong Fortress, so why would they think they can defeat the First Army? Nightingale also adds her 2 cents, suggesting that the enemy's confidence likely stems from the ongoing demon months and the major roads being shut down due to the weather. They're still facing constant demon attacks, and to them, this chaos is the best guarantee for success. Prince Roland commands Iron Axe to mobilize the First Army, taking 500 soldiers and leaving tomorrow morning immediately. He orders Iron Axe to bring 6 cannons, and gives him full discretion to make further plans as he sees fit. He then instructs Carter to stay behind and defend Border Town. Naturally, this suggestion doesn't sit well with Carter, but Roland reminds him that the demons are a bigger threat than the aristocrats. He needs Carter to hold the town while he's away. This time, Roland plans to bring the witches with him. Nightingale quickly pledges to go anywhere he leads. Roland explains that his original plan was to expand slowly, gradually absorbing the elite territories. But the rebellion has given him an opportunity to seize land and labor beyond the fortress, and this time, he won't be lenient. The scene cuts to the butler of the Eltec family, who instructs the boatman to take him to Border Town, promising a handsome reward from the Eltec family. However, the boatman simply replies that it's not about the money. His boat is just a simple hull with no roof to block out the snow. In these temperatures, it will take him several days to reach Border Town, as they will freeze in the boat long before they arrive. The butler asks if there is anyone who can take him instead. The boatman clarifies that only a large sailboat from the fortress is capable of handling such a journey. Just as the butler begins to despair, a giant boat looms in the distance, followed by a whole fleet of ships, all led by Prince Roland himself, making his way to Longsong Fortress. Lightning appears and reports to the prince that the enemy is mainly concentrated in the ruler's castle. There are still some guards fighting, but they can't hold out for much longer. She reports that there are around 200 enemies, and the first wall has already been lost. The enemy seems to have something similar to muskets, but they are completely different from their own. She also informs the prince that Ambassador Petrov is frightened because his family was attacked, and he quickly pulls his father into the castle for safety. However, the rest of his family is gone. The duke's wife and the rest were captured and killed to force his surrender. Lightning had assured Petrov that the prince is on his way, but Petrov made only one request. When the prince asks what the request is, Lightning replies that Petrov wants to make the enemy pay with blood. The prince is unsettled to hear this. The aristocrats have an unspoken rule never to harm a duke or someone of higher rank. But now, the 4 rebelling families seem to have shattered that pride. It must be because of the Honeysucker family's support for him, along with orders from their patron. Prince Roland instructs Lightning to relay his orders. Aside from the witches who will be fighting at the walls, everyone else will rush directly into the city and seize the piers. While the soldiers at the fortress are doing their best to fend off the enemy, the invaders continue to infiltrate the walls. Longsong Fortress soldiers try to shoot their bullets, but the enemy soldiers are equipped with bulletproof shields, and the poor soldier is quickly overwhelmed and defeated. Just when it seems like they're done for, someone crashes through the enemy ranks like a meteor, and it's none other than Maggie and Ash, ready to lend a hand to the struggling soldiers. The soldiers, still terrified by the sight of the witches, are taken aback. Maggie notices the injured soldiers and immediately takes one to Nana for healing. The soldier on the ground, still in disbelief, wonders if this witch is really here to save them. Ash responds positively, stating that she's here under Prince Roland Wimbledon's orders. The soldiers remain stunned, still processing the fact that it would have taken at least 3 days for them to get here from Border Town. How did the prince know the aristocrats were attacking? Ash, however, states that she doesn't have time to answer his question. In front of her are the enemy soldiers, and she's itching to obliterate them. The enemy soldiers laugh, amused by the sight of a woman defending the wall. But their laughter is quickly silenced when Ash swings her heavy blade and cleaves through several soldiers in a single swing, taking their heads with it. The soldiers watch in absolute awe as Ash continues to obliterate the invaders, cutting them down left and right. Once the area is cleared, Ash orders one of the surviving soldiers to gather the rest of his comrades at the wall, assuring him that someone will pick them up later. With that, Ash leaps off the giant wall, crashing down on the soldiers below, sending them scattering like matchsticks. As soon as she starts swinging her sword, it's clear that the soldiers' fate is sealed. Meanwhile, Jacques Meade, who is leading the rebellion, is fascinated that the Honeysuckle family has retreated to the topmost floor of the fortress. Despite being under constant attack for a full day, they're still holding out. He's confident, however, that Petrov will eventually have to give up. After all, how long could he keep avoiding starvation? Jacques Meade reflects on the secret letter from Timothy, which mentioned that if they can capture Longsong Fortress, the royal army will join them and destroy the traitorous King Roland. Once the snow melts, the western regions would be left for him to manage once Roland is defeated. One of his knights reports the state of the battle and asks if they should switch to phalanxes. Of course, Jacques Meade quickly gives the green light. He's sure that the small muskets Longsong Fortress is using will be useless against Timothy's phalanx. Jacques Meade imagines how satisfying it will be to send Petrov's head to Roland, but it looks like his dreams are going to be just dreams at the end. Another subordinate reports to Jacques Meade that something strange is happening at the West Piers. He claims to have heard chugging noises, and when he sent 2 teams to investigate, neither has returned. Jacques Meade, still as arrogant and blinded by his misplaced confidence, dismisses the report with a mocking tone. He asks if it's not just some hobo snoring or something. But his subordinate tells Jacques Meade that only a titan as tall as a wall could snore that loudly, making it clear he's not joking. Meanwhile, at the piers, one of the soldiers looks around with the fire torch in his hands. He can't see anyone around, and worst of all is that the entire area has plunged into darkness with no torches burning. But soon enough, the air is filled with the sounds of bullets, and enemy soldiers drop like flies. Leading the charge is none other than Prince Roland Wimbledon, and his face is a mask of pure fury. When one of the soldiers returns to Jacques Meade to report what's happening at the piers, the poor man is stomped on by Jacques Meade in a fit of rage. The stubborn leader refuses to take the situation seriously. He dismisses the idea that the Prince Roland is marching with thousands of soldiers. The soldier tries his best to convince Jacques Meade, explaining that Duke Rampart's men were hit by a relentless barrage of gunfire. He points out that the darkness was filled with countless sparks, and the shooting didn't stop for even a second. Jacques Meade asks where Duke Rampart is and what happened to the Wild Rose and Leaping Wolf families. He demands they be brought here immediately. But then, the soldier delivers more bad news that those families have already retreated from the battlefield along with their men. Jacques grits his teeth in sheer frustration. He's so stubborn that he refuses to accept the truth. Instead, he convinces himself that the soldier must be exaggerating, likely shaken by the barrage of gunfire. Jacques reasons that muskets might be powerful, but their range is no more than 40 paces, and their reload speed and accuracy should be pretty slow. Even if the enemy troops are equipped with those weapons, he's confident that if they gather all their knights and charge during the reloading phase, they could overwhelm them. The remaining soldiers and servants could then swarm the enemy forces, giving them a chance to defeat them. Jacques orders his knights to call in the phalanx team, planning to advance behind their shields while the musket infantry follows. Not long after, a horde of enemy soldiers marches against our side of soldiers. The firearms enemy is equipped seems massive and terrifying at first glance. But as terrifying as it might be, it's clear their weapons still rely on outdated methods. Each shot takes forever to fire because the fuse has to burn completely to trigger the explosion, just like an old-school bomb. Time isn't something these guns have, and our soldiers take full advantage of that. With just a press of the trigger, they unleash a barrage of bullets, mowing down all the enemy soldiers in the front line. The enemy keeps getting hit, one after another, while Jacques Meade can only watch the scene in front of him, seething with anger. But anger doesn't win battles. In the end, he meets his fate, dead on the ground, surrounded by the soldiers who followed their foolish leader to their death. The prince makes his way to Petrov and his father in the castle. As soon as they see him, They drop to their knees in respect. But the prince quickly tells them to rise, praising them for holding out until the last minute against the 4 rebellious families. He promises that those families will pay dearly for their betrayal. Petrov, however, is consumed with guilt. He's deeply disappointed in himself for failing to protect the fortress for the prince, and the weight of this failure brings him to tears. But the prince simply tells Petrov to rise, emphasizing that he has done nothing deserving of blame. Deep down, the prince acknowledges the truth. You see, Petrov isn't cut out for battle. This rebellion and the earlier loss of the fortress only prove it. But that doesn't make Petrov useless, far from it. He's a natural when it comes to management, business, and seizing opportunities. While Petrov may not be a commander or capable of defending himself against military schemes, that doesn't mean he isn't a good ruler. In fact, the prince is already thinking of giving him a place far from the bloodshed of battle, where his talents for leadership and commerce can truly shine. The prince tries to reassure Petrov, explaining that this rebellion had to have been orchestrated from top to bottom. The enemy disrupted the order in the western region to steal what wasn't theirs. They committed horrific crimes, killing civilians from every class. Today, countless citizens have lost their families and homes, but the prince makes it clear that he doesn't plan to let those bastards win. He acknowledges that Petrov's resistance kept the fortress from falling into an even greater disaster. The bravery and courage of everyone here are worthy of the highest praise. However, the prince reminds them that the battle isn't over. The rebels are running as fast as they can, and now is the time to strike back. The prince vows that no enemy will escape justice, whether they're hiding in the territories of the 4 families or even in the capital. The mastermind behind this rebellion will be held accountable. Starting tomorrow, the prince declares, the First Army will march to conquer the rest of the western region outside Longsong Fortress. Any aristocrat who dares to resist will be dealt with on sight. He orders his army captain that he wants the western region to be unified by next week. Iron Axe salutes the prince, acknowledging his orders. And it's not just him. All the soldiers stand tall and salute their lone prince, recognizing him not just as a leader, but as their king. The scene transitions to René Meade, the younger brother of Meade Jacques, the same cocky sucker who got killed because of his cockiness in the battle. René has been locked up behind bars by Jacques because he refused to rebel against the prince. René is also Petrov's closest friend, making it impossible for him to attack someone he holds so dear. Years ago, when Duke Rayan was defeated, it was Petrov who saved René from prison. From that moment on, René abandoned any ambition to challenge Jacques for the position of family head. All he wanted was to become one of Prince Roland's knights. Now, trapped in the cell, René sees clearly the mistake his brother has made by rising against the prince. Suddenly, his sister arrives, carrying food for him. Her first question is about Petrov, especially since she has feelings for him, so naturally, she's worried. But before René can answer, the entire palace begins to shake. Moments later, soldiers from border town barge in. Standing before the siblings is Iron Axe. He looks directly at René and asks if he is René Meade, the second son of the Elk family. Before René can respond, his sister answers the question, confirming his identity. Iron Axe then reveals his purpose. He has been sent by Prince Roland Wimbledon to find them. He adds that Petrov has personally requested to see both René and his sister. The scene shifts to Longsong Fortress, where the prince is inspecting the firearms used by the enemy soldiers. As far as he can tell, these so-called guns don't even qualify as firearms. They lack a trigger or firing mechanism, and are little more than metal pipes with open ends. As the prince reflects on this, Iron Axe enters the room, accompanied by René Meade and Aurelia Meade. The siblings promptly bow to pay their respects to the prince. The prince quickly commands them to rise and begins by revealing something important. Before he ordered Iron Axe to march on the Elk family's territories, Petrov had assured him that René would never participate in Jacques Meade's rebellion, so the prince is relieved that this turned out to be true. He reminds René of the devastation caused by his brother's rebellion, which was supported by the other families. Countless civilians were killed, 2 cities were destroyed, and Petrov's family was murdered to force him into surrender. The prince sternly tells René that if he had stopped his brother, Longsong Fortress might have been spared from this tragedy. He makes it clear that everyone who participated in the rebellion will face justice, and every rebel will be punished for their actions. However, the prince reassures René that no harm will come to those who are innocent. He also promises that the Elk family will not face extinction as long as they remain loyal. First, the prince informs René that Jacques Meade has perished during the rebellion. He then asks René if he would like to inherit the title of Earl and serve under him. René bows his head without hesitation and pledges his loyalty right away. Turning to his friend Petrov, René apologizes for the pain caused by his family's actions. However, Petrov quickly reassures him that none of this was his fault. René reflects on earlier times from the earlier chapters, the time when he once proposed that Petrov marry his sister. René is fascinated that the bond they share as friends has not weakened in all those years. Afterwards, The mission to unite Western region continued. The rebels stood no chance against the prince's first army. The outcome of most battles was decided in a single firefight, with the rebels crumbling before they could even reload their primitive weapons. They fell apart like a sack of potatoes. The First Army spent most of its time pursuing the rebels and conquering territories. They captured one stronghold after another, day by day. The Elk, Leaping Wolf, and Wild Rose families were the first to fall. However, the campaign stalled when the army reached the Maple family's palace. The soldiers encountered an unexpected obstacle: a moat surrounding the palace. 2 soldiers were injured in an initial attempt to approach, and it became clear they couldn't fight effectively while the enemy maintained the high ground. If they wanted to breach the gate, they would have to attack from the bridge, but that was heavily guarded and under constant watch. The commander, whose name escaped my head, lamented not having the artillery team with them. A few well-placed cannonballs could have easily shattered the gates and resolved the siege. Iron Axe highlights an important detail. Reports indicate that the Maple family didn't contribute many soldiers to the rebellion, and their earl didn't even show up. This means their forces are still at full strength, making it unlikely they'll succeed without heavy weaponry. Reflecting on the past, Iron Axe notes that if this had been during his time in Iron Sand City, he wouldn't have hesitated to lose hundreds of soldiers to fulfill his chief's orders. But now he's watched his soldiers grow and become who they are today, and he refuses to risk even a single life unnecessarily. With no artillery or heavy weapons available, the only viable option is to ask for the witch's help. A few days later, Maggie appears soaring through the skies, heading straight toward the Maple family's castle. The soldiers on the walls fire arrows at her, but her massive body renders them completely ineffective. In the next moment, Maggie drops a giant TNT onto the palace. The explosion is immediate, and takes the entire structure in flames, reducing it to a charred ruin in a single swoop. Iron Axe stood watching as the Maple family fell, and with their defeat, he gave the final signal for his soldiers to charge forward. The Maple family was taken down completely. By the time Iron Axe returned to Longsong Fortress, it was the 6th night, and the entire western region was finally under the prince's control. Petrov then came to meet the prince, carrying the completed reports and estimates. He had organized the remaining aristocrats of the western region into categories, and even listed them in alphabetical order by name and criminal status. The findings were staggering. 64 aristocrats were found guilty of participating in the rebellion. 137 aristocrats either refused to participate or were unaware of the rebellion. The rest were knights, nobles, or other non-participating aristocrats. The highest-ranking guilty party was Roman Camellia, the Earl of the Maple family, who had already been captured by Iron Axe. The rebellion had wiped out the 6 prominent families of the western region. The Lion, Leaping Wolf, Maple, and Wild Rose families were now effectively extinct. The Honeysuckle and Elk families had been spared, but their influence and power had been reduced to nothing. With the rebellion crushed, the entire western region was now firmly under Prince Roland's command. Petrov reports that Iron Axe has provided him with a list of criminals, but he's unsure if he should hand it over. He worries that Iron Axe may have made a mistake in his judgment. However, the prince assures him that Iron Axe is incredibly skilled at interrogations. The prince trusts Iron Axe's final ruling. In fact, every aristocrat prisoner had been verified by Nightingale, ensuring that no innocent person was punished. Petrov then asks the prince what he plans to do with the guilty aristocrats. Seeing the hesitation on Petrov's face, the prince asks if any of his friends are listed among the criminals. Petrov replies that none of his friends are involved, but he's concerned that executing the criminals might pose a risk to his rule. He worries that doing so could stir unrest and opposition among the citizens, leading to potential rebellion against his leadership. The prince, surprised by Petrov's political maturity, realizes that Petrov has thoughtfully considered the consequences. He's impressed by how Petrov has set aside his personal feelings, weighing the outcomes of such a decision. Instead of growing bitter and cynical about the violence, Petrov has learned and matured from it. The prince reveals his plan to Petrov, explaining that he intends to publicly announce the entirety of the situation. He will list the names of the rebels, including aristocrats, soldiers, servants, and guards. The organizers who directly instigated the rebellion will be executed, along with others who committed murders. The remaining rebels will be sent to other mines for labor. In the end, only 5 or 6 aristocrats will be executed. The public will likely assume that the rest were spared because of their expired privileges. The prince believes that, after this, no one will consider the actions cruel or unusual. After all, rebellion is a grave offense. With the obstacles in the western region now cleared, the prince is confident that the new laws and systems will be respected and implemented without hindrance. He sees this as a significant step toward building a true city, where order and structure prevail. The prince plans to begin the renovation of his fortress, starting with the installation of French windows. 3 days later, the prince gave a speech at the Longsong Fortress Theater. First, he offered condolences for the rebellion's casualties and distributed a pension, Then, he made some announcements about his new policies. The theater's audience was smaller than he expected, and the snow had discouraged most people from leaving their homes. Those who were present were skeptical of these promises. After all, corruption had led to famine in the past, and even emergency rations were mixed with sand and leaves, so receiving golden royals seemed too good to be true. Of course, when he actually did distribute the golden royals, the atmosphere changed drastically. Many more people showed up for the aristocrats' trial, and the entire theater was packed. Some even sat in the corridors. Criminal trials and executions still served as common entertainment for people everywhere. In the end, 132 people were sentenced to execution, and the other 900 or so had participated in the rebellion, but didn't kill anyone. As a result, they were sent to the northern mines. The power of the western region's aristocrats was finally wiped out. However, clearing these obstacles was just the beginning. Creating a new order was the most important condition for true governance. To lighten their moods, the prince prepared a grand banquet. Since the large families like Honeysuckle and Elk were all on the prince's side, the remaining smaller families tripped over themselves to praise our prince. Even at this small banquet, they praised the tiniest things, like the chopsticks and the food. Now, it's safe to say they were trying way too hard. The prince then grabbed everyone's attention and announced that he would like to share an art album with them. When they saw the drawings, their eyes widened. The images looked incredibly realistic, and it didn't seem like they had been drawn by hand. No pigments could express such detailed colors. Seeing this, the prince was pleased that the city's upper class had an appreciation for art. He then corrected them, explaining that the drawings were indeed created by hand. But the distinction was that the artist was a witch, and her pigments were made with magic, which was used in every image. As soon as the mention of witches came, everyone's mood dropped faster than the guy who always make dad leaving me jokes in the comment section. The church's influence has been eradicated long ago, and the prince assures them that witches are not much different from normal citizens, something he has emphasized many times. Of course, they believe the prince and are ready to place their faith in his words. He then shows images of former aristocrats from the western region in the album, such as Tegu Pine, whom he believes most of them would even personally know. He currently lives in Bordertown, and this album serves as a record of his life there. As they can see, Tegu Pine is an aristocrat living under the new order. He is currently training in marksmanship to protect Bordertown, and once the turmoil settles, he plans to take his daughter and servants hunting in the misty forest. Ever since selling his territory to the prince, he has settled in Bordertown. His noble rank has been raised by 1 level, and his family's assets have grown many times over. The prince then reminds them how he has already revealed his plans to build a city in the western region. So Bordertown, Longsong Fortress, and the land in between will become one. Of course, this unification will be in terms of administration. In other words, the new city will follow the same laws and policies the prince has set up. This is part of the reason why he needs to collect aristocratic territories and assume bureaucratic powers. One person questions what will happen to their lands. The prince assures them that the land will still belong to them. Under this new order, any invasion attempt will be dealt with by the military. As long as everyone follows the law, there will be more opportunities for them to profit than they could ever imagine. The principle is similar to the cake he is cutting right now. Why settle for a small slice now when they can have a much bigger piece? None of them have been to Bordertown, so it's normal that no one knows just how much bigger it can be. During the 2 previous quarters, Bordertown income has reached 30,000 golden royals. Of course, this revelation boggles everyone's mind. The prince continues explaining that if it weren't for the month of demons, that number would have grown by another 10,000 by now. Since aristocrats will manage their own business, these numbers will come to them soon. One of them asks if the prince is basically implying that they will have to run the fortress. The prince responds with a yes, but also with a no. You see, the fortress will become a region of the city, governed by the general city hall. The prince will build a branch of the city hall at Longsong Fortress, and it will follow the Bordertown's format, creating many smaller departments. Each of them will work at these departments and handle their respective operations. Managing a region is an incredibly complicated job, and while it can bring huge benefits, it's not easy to handle. After everything settles in Longsong Fortress, all of the new aristocrats will come to Bordertown in order to gain experience firsthand how an effective city hall is run. Everyone present here will also have to take classes on management. For now, this is all the prince has to share. The next topic is about rats, and he wants to ask what everyone knows about these shady people. Renee reveals that rats collect intel on the streets, and that he used to be affiliated with them. The prince curiously asks what kind of relationship he had with the rats, to which Renee hesitantly admits that he used to be the leader of the Blazing Fire Gang and had helped other gangs fight for territory before. The other representatives choke on their tea upon learning that Renee, from the Earl's family, had once been a rat. Even the prince is disturbed by this revelation. But before anyone jumps to conclusions, Petrov decides to clear the air. He explains that a few years ago, the rat presence at the docks was at an all-time high, with civilians and visiting merchants being attacked every day, yet the city guards did nothing. Petrov could not stand it, so he brought his own guards and recruited people from the slums to drive the rats out. Renee even sent Petrov daily letters when Petrov was in the capital, claiming that it was a glorious battle, one on par with fighting demons. While Renee is dying of embarrassment, the prince expresses his plan to remove every rat from Longsong Fortress so that civilians can live in peace. But Renee objects to this idea. He acknowledges that while rats are just everyday people, they wouldn't stand a chance against knights. However, if rats are labeled as criminals in order to get rid of them, there won't be many people left in Longsong Fortress. He explains that people often change from civilians to rats, or vice versa, and many become desperate when the months of demons are prolonged. It's why many rulers allow black markets and criminal activity to exist. They prefer the rats to fight among themselves rather than risk creating a huge riot. The prince then inquires who organizes the rats, to which Renee reveals that some are local aristocrats, while others are foreign criminals. The prince is glad that no one present here owns a gang. However, it would be fine even if they did, as the prince wouldn't mind as long as they cooperate in clearing out these bad nests of rats. He then addresses Renee and assigns him the mission to put an end to all illegal activity in the fortress within the next month. Renee will need to cooperate with the First Army and eliminate various gang leaders to crush all rat organizations. He also commands Petrov to open the fortress's food inventories and distribute more rations. Some present there quickly object to this idea, arguing that if they coddle the public, they will only demand more, and by then, everyone will become beggars in the city. The prince finds himself disappointed that these aristocrats could only think of the negative all the time, which makes him believe they are lazy and foolish. He is certain that all these commoners need is a good role model and proper direction, and they will become the real backbone of the world he is trying to create. So he declares that he has made up his mind, and this will be his first lesson in teaching how to run a proper city hall. Every citizen needs to understand every detail of public policy. He wants everyone to answer the public's questions and listen to their feedback, because this is how an administration avoids becoming an empty shell. You see, new ideas, unified laws, enforcement, and political transparency are everything the prince is preparing for his new order. The scene then transitions to Sister Echo, followed by Iron Axe, who reminds her that the fortress is not as safe as Border Town, so she shouldn't wander alone. The prince had also asked him to guard her if she left the castle without any other witches. Every time Iron Axe talks to her, he refers to her as Chief. After all, she was the chief of the Osha tribe under her former name, Drow Silvermoon. She doesn't like being called by this title, but Iron Axe continues to do so because this is how he sees her, even to this day. The other citizens begin to stare at them, so she decides to wander off to the other side of the shore. As she walks around, Echo points out how Iron Sand City was nothing like this. Before leaving the southern region, she thought the entire continent looked the same and never expected anything other than sand. Water and oases were precious resources that people would die for, but here, no one would bleed for the Redwater River, and water is available everywhere. But Iron Axe reminds her that people still fight for other things, such as golden royals, jewels, pride, and status. He believes that battles are everywhere, no matter the circumstances. Echo, however, still believes that the prince could stop the war. Even Nightingale told her that the Sand Tribes, Grey Castle, mortals, and witches, all of them would enjoy resources equally and live as they wish. She then questions Iron Axe if he wants to return to Iron Sand. The big guy responds that he has already sworn allegiance to the three gods and will serve Roland Wimbledon forever. However, she doesn't need to worry, as the prince promised her revenge, and he won't go back on his word. When the day of their return comes, everyone will respect them. But Echo doesn't want to be the chief of the Osha tribe anymore. She likes to stay near trees and greenery, and she enjoys being with Wendy and Nightingale. She also likes to learn the songs that the prince teaches her. While she does wish to go back and visit one day, she doesn't want to remain in the desert and endlessly quarrel for water. She decides to start practicing her voice here, as no one is around and she won't be disturbing anyone. She tells Iron Axe that she has made a song for her home and wants him to hear it. She explains that she used the techniques the prince taught her, advising her to mix different instruments together to create a layered tune. But the names were strange. She is sure that only the prince would come up with words like techno and heavy metal. Iron Axe just smirks, believing that the prince is naturally different, and in fact, he is the child of God. Echo then begins her singing, and as she sings, the atmosphere around her begins to shift. Since this song is directed at her home, the entire mood changes, and the scene starts to transform into a sand-filled landscape, even though it's the dead of winter. Once Echo stops singing, everything returns to normal. However, Iron Axe notices that the sand that appeared during her singing is still present on his hands. Later, he reports this to the prince, explaining that he saw the desert in Echo's voice and even found specks of sand. He emphasizes that he didn't find them intentionally. He was completely immersed in the moment and didn't even consider if what he saw was real. The prince is unsure of what to make of this, while Iron Axe continues to convince the prince that what he is saying is the truth. Although when she sang other songs, he did not see much, but the experience was surreal. The prince then presents the sand to Nightingale, asking if she can tell whether it is the product of magic. However, even Nightingale has no clue what is going on, as there is no trace of magic on the sand. But when she looks at Echo, she can see that her magic has solidified. Sister Echo seems glad to hear this happy news, while Nightingale reports that Echo's magic is like a blue jewel, as clear as water, and she is just as strong as Maggie. The prince then suggests that although sand is everywhere, Iron Axe wouldn't claw through the snow and dig some out to trick him. With that in mind, he wants to test her abilities himself and tells Echo to sing the tune she created for her homeland. As soon as she does, the entire building begins to echo with her sweet voice. After hearing her tone, Nightingale reports that she heard the sound of wind through the trees, and the temperature rose slightly. But the prince states that he didn't see a desert, which means perhaps her magic didn't work as expected. Iron Axe continues to insist that he indeed saw the desert. The prince then decides to conduct another test, telling Echo to just sing the song he taught her. Echo begins singing again, and it seems like the experience is different for everyone. For instance, the song Gorillas that Echo played makes Sylvie remember the fear she felt when she first saw a cannon fire. The prince has also started to figure out that a song becomes more significant if the audience has a personal memory related to it. Only then can they truly sink into the illusion it creates. Iron Axe relates to the southern region's culture and environment because he grew up there, and that's why he can feel the desert in Echo's song. Since the prince himself hasn't been there, he can't experience the same thing. However, the prince doesn't have the means to test the full extent of Echo's abilities for now, but he is very curious. He wonders if, when the audience is fully immersed, the illusion could actually become reality. He has high hopes for Echo's new ability. He sees the potential for her to motivate soldiers, calm crowds, and perform in the theater, using her magic to influence those around her in powerful ways. Her influence over emotions would be a priceless asset for our prince in the coming days. The scene transitions outside, where Renee delivers an announcement on behalf of the protector of the Western region, Roland Wimbledon, and the minister of Longsong Fortress, Petrov. Starting today, the Fortress City Hall will purchase any extra grain from citizens. However, beginning next month, all private sales of food will be considered a crime. Only the City Hall will be allowed to buy and sell grain. Anyone caught committing this crime will be severely punished, and anonymous reports will be rewarded with 25 silvers. The announcement sparks an uproar among the citizens, who find it ridiculous that Petrov is planning to ban private food sales. Renee tries to calm the crowd, assuring them that he will address all their questions one by one. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to this shady hobo kid, who looks like he's on a mission. From his perspective, he believes that what Renee just announced will cause chaos. If the aristocrats and merchants hoard all the food again, a massive riot is inevitable. After all, most people depend on the rats for their food supply. In a back alley, this blonde teenager meets with a group of his fellows and quickly reports what he overheard. He expresses his confusion about what the wealthy are thinking and shares his concern about how they'll manage to get food now. This group of hobos begins to worry about their future survival. They mention two witches, Paper and Fang, who used to help them earn food. While we haven't met Fang yet, we know Paper has already been escorted to Border Town by Petrov. Kanash, the local underworld boss who dominates shady dealings in this particular area, becomes their main concern. They fear he'll use this food crisis to blackmail them at every turn, further tightening his grip on their lives. But their worries are eased right away when they hear the announcement that everyone will be entitled to 2 bowls of hot porridge per day, served at noon and night. The initiative is presented as an act of generosity from Prince Roland. The scrawny and sickly boy in this group feels relieved at the news. For a brief moment, he wonders aloud if this might mean they no longer have to worry about being threatened by Kanash for food. However, his more cautious friend quickly clamps a hand over his mouth, because speaking ill of Kanash in public could lead to serious trouble if overheard. Meanwhile, Renee continues with the announcement, revealing more about the City Hall's plans. Alongside the porridge distribution, Prince Roland intends to crack down on criminal activities that threaten the lives and properties of the citizens. Renee warns everyone to steer clear of black markets, pubs, gambling houses, and other places associated with trouble during this time. He assures them that the prince has provided public safety officers and police to maintain order and protect the people. The group of hobo kids begins to worry again. They fear they might be forced out of the city entirely, and if that happens, they have no idea where they would go or how they would survive. The scene then shifts to Kanash, who is shown smirking wickedly. He appears unfazed by the city hall's measures. In his view, no aristocrat, no matter how influential, can truly maintain control in foreign territory. What truly matters, he believes, is who controls the local power. Even the king of Greycastle, in his opinion, rules in name only. In simple words, Kanash basically thinks that rats are the need of the filthy rich, otherwise they won't be able to run their business. Though Kanash is confident in his own perspective, he finds the second part of the announcement strange. Normally, if those in power wanted to issue free food to gain support, they would inform the rats first, ensuring the system worked smoothly. Yet this time, it seems like the food distribution plan is being presented as something meant for the entire city. To him, this approach seems excessive and unusual. He resolves to consult his boss, the leader of the Bloodhand gang. Only his boss knows the full extent of what's really happening behind the scenes. It turns out the information about the city hall's announcement was brought to Kanash by none other than the blonde kid and his hobo friends. However, instead of rewarding them for delivering such crucial news, Kanash reacts with cruelty. He completely bans them from ever tasting the porridge offered by the city hall. Moreover, he threatens that if they are caught sneaking out to eat the free food, they should consider their mouths sewn shut as punishment. Later, as the group walks through the grimy streets, the blonde kid is determined to taste the porridge despite Kanash's warning. His cautious friend reminds him of the threat they were given, but the blonde kid brushes it off. He reassures them that their friend Sunflower is keeping watch, and that right now, and Kanash's closest followers are currently all huddled by the fire, so no one will notice they've slipped away. But the scrawny friend they are carrying, whose name is George, is in worse shape than ever. His condition is rapidly deteriorating, and anyone suffering from the freezing sickness won't survive without food. The black bread Kanash gave them is nowhere near enough to stave off hunger, and George needs something more, and a bowl of hot porridge might be the only thing that can give him a chance to survive. As they arrive at the city hall to receive the porridge, the blonde kid is actually surprised that food is actually being served. The line stretches long, and as they try to sneak into the front, one of the city hall officials warns them not to push or cut the line, or else they'll be disqualified from receiving food. The blonde kid insists that his friend is sick and urgently needs food to survive. George has been starving for days and is now suffering from the freezing sickness. City Hall Officer Wade quickly gestures to his fellow officer to take the sick boy and tells the other two kids that they can find their friend here once he has been cured. Instead of waiting in line for their share of porridge, the blonde kid decided to return to their camp. If they stay here, it would take at least half an hour to get the food, which could put Sunflower in danger. However, when they arrive, they find that their worst fears have already come true. She is already in danger. The filthy scumbags have strung her up with a rope around her neck. She's barely surviving, desperately balancing on her tiptoes on a short bench to avoid suffocating. She is getting brutalized because the others snuck out of the place. Before the two boys can intervene, the thugs cruelly kick the bench out from under her feet. The real horror begins. The blonde kid and his friend rush to save Sunflower, but the thugs are quicker. They strike the two boys over the head, knocking them unconscious. With the boys incapacitated, the scumbags turn their sadistic attention back to Sunflower. One of them decides to pry out one of her teeth, while another thug viciously pounds on the blonde kid, who is starting to stir. But suddenly, the rope around Sunflower's neck is severed, cut by someone or something unseen. This familiar purple mist starts to fill the area, and before the attackers can understand what's happening, shit goes to hell. In just a matter of seconds, two guys have been taken down. That is when someone crashes down from the rooftop, and it's Ash, the mad lad lady. More and more of the thugs swarm the area, but Ash swings her blade and sends everyone scattering in every direction. Nightingale is also present, having taken care of the other attackers with equal skill. The blonde kid rushes to tend to his injured friend. It's then that Officer Wade arrives, raiding the scene with her team. He demands that everyone drop their weapons, declaring the arrest is being made in the name of His Highness Roland. Seeing the overwhelming power of the City Hall forces, the blonde kid is left stunned and overwhelmed. The announcement turned out to be true. These officers, sent by Prince Roland, are indeed here to arrest the rats. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, he is the same kid who used to be with Paper, and he was devastated that Petrov took her away from him. But right now his eyes fill with tears when he realizes that the promises made by Petrov and the prince are not shallow. All the rats at the scene are arrested, including the group of kids. Nightingale approaches the blonde kid, telling him to answer truthfully. She asks him if he has ever killed anyone or robbed anyone. The kid quickly responds with no. Since he is spitting the truth, Nightingale tells him to go get some porridge. She then turns to the other two kids, but before she continues, the blonde kid asks her if she's a witch. Nightingale responds affirmatively, and the kid reveals that these thugs are Kanash's underlings, and that Boss Bloodhand is the true leader of the rat faction in the fortress. He believes that catching them is key to eradicating the entire rat faction. Nightingale reassures him, promising that no criminal will escape justice. This assurance brings a small, hopeful smile to the kids' face who were brutalized by these bastards. The three kids rush to join the queue, feeling a sense of happiness and relief now that they've been saved by a witch. They're excited about the possibility of meeting Paper someday. After standing in the line for a while, they finally reach the front and get their turn to receive food. As they collect their bowls, Renee announces that once the months of demons come to an end, Longsong Fortress and Border Town will combine to form a new city. The land in between will need to be developed, which means new jobs will be available for everyone. For the blonde kid, this means he won't have to live like a rat anymore, and with his new opportunities, he'll have a better chance of meeting Paper one day. But that's a story for later. We transition back to Border Town, where Wendy and Sister Scroll are sitting down for some tea, trying out a new blend from the City of Dawn. It's a peaceful moment, and they're enjoying the warmth of their drink. Meanwhile, Paper is in a different part of the town, focused on trying to ignite the stones in the divine sigil. Unfortunately, she's still not strong enough to light them all. After her little cute struggles, she turns to Wendy with a curious look and asks when she'll be able to ignite the second stone. Wendy, in her usual calm and wise manner, reminds her that she can only ignite the second stone once she's older and more powerful. In the meantime, Wendy suggests that Paper should just enjoy her hugs and focus on her growth. That is when the scene pans towards Spear Passy, who is sitting nearby. Passy appears to be somewhat jealous as she watches Paper and Wendy interact. The kind of bond and support Paper receives at such a young age is something that Passy realizes she missed out on during her own childhood, and it stirs up some emotions in her. Wendy then inquired of Passy about her recent experiences at the City Hall, as she had been visiting there frequently. Well, her visits were quite interesting. It is a place where there's much to learn. She remarks that it's the first time she's seen such a strict, orderly management system in place. It's far more efficient than the old ways, where just a few high-ranking officials dealt with everything themselves. The City Hall ensures its continued efficiency even if some employees leave, always keeping positions open for citizens to join. Passy is especially impressed by the regulations and laws Prince Roland has enacted, noting that they are very unique, something she has never seen anywhere else before. Just as they're discussing this, a City Hall officer enters and interrupts their conversation, reporting that a villager has come forward with a troubling claim. Apparently, the villager says that her daughter has just become a witch. Since Prince Roland isn't present at the moment, the officer explains that the prince had previously instructed the Witch Union to handle matters like this when he is not in the castle. Later, Wendy and Sister Scroll arrive at the registration hall. There is a mother along with her daughter, who is supposedly a witch. The mother claims that they are immigrants from the southern region, and they moved here like a month ago. Wendy inquires this supposed witch and asks her for her name. The timid young girl doesn't respond, so her mother beside her pushes her forward. Hesitantly, the girl introduces herself as Summer. The old hag then explains that her husband is still working in the boiler rooms, so she brought her daughter here on her own. She excitedly explains that she's heard witches receive a golden royal every month as salary. Wendy confirms this, and the woman becomes even more excited, practically pushing her daughter forward as she insists that they are ready to sign any necessary contract. Of course, both Wendy and Sister Scroll can sense that this mother is up to no good. Wendy calmly explains that joining the Witch Union requires an evaluation. Since Prince Roland is not present, Summer will need to stay at the castle for now, and the contract can be signed once the prince returns. The mother agrees without hesitation, and promptly begins to walk away, leaving her daughter behind. The poor girl looks visibly anxious. Sensing her unease, Wendy gently explains to her that there's nothing to worry about. She adds that the Witch Union isn't anything like the terrible rumors people might spread. Later, Agatha joins them and hands Summer a magical stone. Wendy reminds Agatha that Summer isn't yet familiar with her magic, as it's only been 3 days since her awakening. Agatha assures her that there's no cause for concern. The stone she's provided is a balanced magic stone, designed to measure the overall level of magic within someone. While it's not as precise as Nightingale or Sylvie's abilities to sense magic, it's the best tool they have available to determine if Summer truly possesses magical powers. After the little test, Agatha confirms that Summer does qualify as a witch, specifically a summoner type, but her level is extremely low. Agatha further explains that it's not unusual for magic to be this weak early on since it hasn't fully gathered yet. It's still in a juvenile stage. They decide to figure out what kind of ability Summer has, so Wendy asks her to demonstrate. Without hesitation, Summer uses her magic, quickly forming a mirage. The illusion offers a glimpse of the past, where we see Sister Scroll and Wendy having that tea time. Everyone watching is left awestruck because the scene Summer creates looks incredibly lifelike. Agatha notes that while the ability to create illusions is rare, it's not unheard of. She recalls at least 2 other people in the Alliance with similar powers, one of them being a high-tier witch from Falling Star City. Meanwhile, Summer feels drained, having used up most of her mana. Wendy then asks her how many times she can use that ability in a day, and whether she can control the illusions more specifically. The girl reveals that she can use her ability about 2 or 3 times a day. She hasn't tried going beyond that, but it gets increasingly tiring each time. Hearing this, Scroll explains that it sounds like magic depletion, which is pretty natural. Magic flows like water or swirls like fog. It's the source of her power every time she uses it. Scroll assures her that they'll slowly teach her about the other attributes of magic over time. Later, Summer demonstrates her ability again. This time, the scene she creates shows an event from about a day and a half ago, when the witches were having dinner together. Scroll records everything to share with the prince. Few days pass by, and Sister Scroll decides to send Summer back until Nightingale does not verify her identity. After all, they can't afford to take any risks when it comes to Prince Roland's life. So because of that, Summer had to leave. But she seems much more energetic when she leaves the castle after staying for a while. She asked lots of questions about the witches and the prince, clearly excited to learn more. Initially, Summer thought the prince was a scary guy who kept many women around him, but she soon realized it was just a misunderstanding. However, things didn't go as smoothly when Scroll took her back home. Summer's mother didn't take the news well. All this old hag seemed to care about was money. To resolve the issue, Scroll ended up giving her 1 gold royale to keep her quiet. Wendy isn't sure if giving Summer's mother money was the right decision. However, Scroll reminds her that if paying off that old hag can keep Summer safe from her mother's harsh treatment, it's a small price to pay. Scroll points out that there are many days ahead of them, and if 1 gold royale can buy Summer a more comfortable life at home, it's worth it. After hearing this, Wendy agrees. She actually hadn't thought about it that way before. She then reflects on how much better the prince understands the value of witches' abilities compared to her. Wendy admits she's neither as logical nor as calculating as Scroll when it comes to weighing risks. This realization makes her doubt whether she's fit to lead the witch union at all, but Scroll voices her opinion as well. She believes that no one cares more about the witches than Wendy does. Scroll explains that it was only after her time with Kara's Witch Association that she truly understood this. A witch who genuinely considers the well-being of her sisters, regardless of their powers, is the kind of person who deserves to lead. According to Scroll, that quality is Wendy's greatest strength. While the both ladies are having their conversation, they hear that the prince has returned, and a grand feast has been prepared to celebrate his arrival. The first thing the prince does is hold his most cherished waifu close to his heart. Of course, there are also the overly excited girls who rush in to hug him uninvited. The entire palace feels alive with joy, and the prince feels a deep sense of homecoming, finding solace in the warmth of these familiar smiles compared to the cold atmosphere of Longsong Fortress. Later, the prince makes his way to the library, with Anna quietly following him. He's pleased to see her there and quickly shows her the gift he brought back. It's a collection of historical records and legends, along with some secret lore about the western region, which he retrieved from the Duke's office. Before he can finish explaining, Anna closes the distance, and they share a heartfelt kiss. For a while, they decide to just savor the moment together, letting the world fade away. The next day, Wendy reports to the prince about the newly awakened witch in Border Town. After reading through the report, the prince agrees to take her in, and they decide she can sign a contract that very afternoon. After that, Wendy hesitantly brings up a matter that has been weighing on her. She admits that she doesn't feel capable of managing the witch union. In her view, Scroll is far more experienced and mature, making her a better candidate for leadership. The prince listens patiently, but already knows Wendy had shared this concern with Scroll. He also knows what Scroll's response was. He gently reminds Wendy of something important. Management techniques can be learned, but personalities are much harder to change. He points out that, aside from Maggie, she's the only one who truly adores all of the witches equally. Besides, the prince reminds Wendy that Scroll is already in charge of the education department, and her workload is only increasing. She wouldn't have enough time to focus on the new witches properly. He shares his vision of making the witch union self-sufficient, with minimal input needed from him. He wants the organization to be well-known and respected by everyone. To achieve this, he tasks Wendy with creating a proper management system to determine witch assignments. As for him, his role will focus only on guidance for evaluations and abilities. He also suggests that Wendy consult Miss Spear for specific advice on management. Additionally, she's free to recruit assistants or city hall workers to help her with administrative tasks. Wendy acknowledges her role with a little dose of confidence and decides to leave to start working on the system. Now that Roland is done with his paperwork, he decides to sort the books he had been working on yesterday. While doing so, he reflects on his romantic moment with Anna from the previous day. He notices how she's become more openly affectionate with him lately, a change that's impossible to miss. Feeling moved by her affection, Roland resolves to reciprocate her feelings more actively, deciding to take the initiative with her moving forward. As Roland sorts through the books, Nightingale suggests him not to keep Anna waiting. With those words, she disappears. Her words leave the prince with a lot to think about. He wonders if the best approach is simply to follow the social rules of his old world, to avoid hurting Nightingale and Anna any more than he already has. Just then, Summer arrives in front of the prince after passing Nightingale's test. Since the prince has already heard about her from Wendy, he hands over the contract papers. Summer quickly grabs the pen to scribble her name, but then hesitates. She gets embarrassed as she admits that she doesn't know how to write. The prince reassures her that there's nothing to be embarrassed about. He suggests she just press her fingerprint instead, which she does. Once done, Summer asks the prince why he decided to take her in, especially since she feels her ability is practically useless. The prince smiles and assures her that her ability is far from useless. In fact, it's something that any detective would dream of. Solving mysteries or crimes will be a piece of cake for her, and she'll come to understand that soon enough. He adds that, starting today, he assigns Nightingale as her boss to guide her. The scene transitions to somewhere in Border Town, in the room of the performer's crew. Here we meet Ferland's wife, Eileen, and Miss May, the star of the West and the object of Night Carter's affections. Miss May appears to be getting ready for a trip to the fortress. She's double-checking her bag to ensure she has everything she needs. Eileen suggests she pack an extra set of pillows, blankets, and sheets, but Miss May brushes it off, saying she doesn't really need them. Carter has also promised to buy her new clothes at the market. Apparently, the new stocks in the market come from raids on the 4 great families. While Eileen is delighted at the idea of getting high-quality fabric, Miss May feels proud knowing that the set Carter plans to buy is supposed to cost 5 gold royals. Hearing this, the people in the background are awestruck. For them, that amount is like 2 years' salary. But then again, it's not entirely surprising after all. Miss May used to perform in the capital, and her fame as the star of the West precedes her. As they continue chatting, Miss May asks Eileen about recent events, specifically recalling that Sir Eltec, Ferland's father, had come to Border Town recently. She's curious about how he's doing. Eileen quickly explains that the bulletin announced the prince had cracked down on all illegal activities in the fortress. The Maple Leaf, Leaping Wolf, and Wild Rose's families have been dismantled, and the Eltec family was dragged into the aftermath as well. Most of their troubles stemmed from Ferland's brother, Miso. Miso had been arrested by Prince Roland's soldiers after the failed rebellion. Since he hadn't harmed anyone and voluntarily surrendered, he was only sentenced to 10 years of labor. However, once he chose to rebel, he was no longer considered part of the family. In the end, Sir Eltec still wanted Ferland to be the heir. He believed the family could be great again in Ferland's hands. But Ferland just wanted to become a knight, and Eileen supports him no matter what decision he makes. At that moment, Night Carter unexpectedly shows up, leaving everyone a bit surprised since they weren't expecting him today. He explains that the prince had given him permission to leave early. He then presents a gift he bought for Miss May, which lightens the mood of everyone in the room. The side characters quickly catch on to the situation, so they excuse that they have work to do and eventually leave, giving the sweet couple some much-needed time alone. And as for the last time, I skipped over their relationship moment where they were all lovey-dovey and you guys grilled me hard for it. I did that because I know not everyone wants to stall the story. I've even seen people criticize me for throwing in a joke here and there, so I've been avoiding it. Honestly, no matter what you do, you can't please everyone. Carter apparently has brought new clothes for Miss May, and he specifically asked the prince to design them for him. Carter had told the prince about their upcoming engagement, and so the prince quickly suggested a type of clothing that would be perfect for a wedding. However, it was also quite difficult to make. To get it done, the prince hired Miss Soraya and had to use ice cream bread as the payment. Carter gave Miss May some time to wear the outfit. Later, he entered into the room back once she was ready. She looked absolutely stunning. This left Carter blushing so hard his cheeks turned as red as tomatoes, and everything felt so sparkling and fresh, like spring had already arrived. Carter then recalls that the prince had promised they could create a new type of wedding ceremony after the months of demons. He was really looking forward to that special day. The scene transitions to a conference room where representatives from every department have gathered for a meeting. The prince begins by explaining his plans to build a new city in the western region. Holding up a book titled Basic Kingdom Laws, he declares that everything written in it will serve as the foundation for this new city. The laws and systems outlined in the book will be implemented to ensure proper structure and order. He encourages everyone to read the book and freely ask questions or voice any doubts they might have. To get things started, he instructs Barov to read it aloud for everyone. Barov picks up the book and decides to begin with the abstract, which summarizes the proposed structure and organization of the new city. Barov begins reading aloud the key points of the Basic Kingdom Laws. The first is, all territory under Roland Wimbledon's control belongs to Roland Wimbledon. Second, the City Hall is the highest authority in the territory, and under Roland Wimbledon, It will be responsible for all management and maintenance in the western region. Third, there are various ways for foreigners to become citizens, and the city hall will offer at least 3 methods. Fourth, no civilians will be bound to a caste system. There will be no more slaves, servants, or serfs. Men and women will be equal, and civilians will be protected by law, with rights to protections and benefits through taxes. Fifth, aristocrats will be on the same level as any other citizen. Nobility will no longer have any authority, though it may still serve as an honorary title. Sixth, the safety and priorities of civilians will be ensured by Roland Wimbledon, and any violation of this is strictly prohibited. Seventh, the territory will support legal businesses and a free market. Civilians will have inalienable rights to education, careers, and marriage. Eighth, the new flag will be based on the towers and spears of the Grey Castle Royal Crest. It will feature a large 5-pointed star above the tower and 3 smaller stars below. The large star symbolizes Roland Wimbledon, while the smaller stars represent the City Hall, the military, and the Witch Union. Ninth and the most critical point. The territory's name will be Neverwinter City. The months of demons finally come to an end, marking a day of grand celebration for the entire town. Prince Roland addresses the citizens, expressing his pride in their collective efforts. He emphasizes that the victory belongs to everyone who has contributed to the growth and defense of Border Town, regardless of where they come from. This success stands as a testament to their unity, resilience, and hard work. He reminds them that the threat of evil still lingers and will inevitably return. However, with their combined strength, victory will always be within their grasp. He encourages the townsfolk to embrace the moment and calls for everyone to celebrate their achievements and look forward with determination. The festivities include an elaborate stage show and a grand feast for all. The townspeople enjoy free meals, and for many, the abundance of meat is an extraordinary treat. The joyful atmosphere underscores their shared triumph and the bonds that hold the community together. As night falls, the focus shifts to the castle courtyard, where the witches hold a private celebration away from the townsfolk. However, not everyone is feeling these party vibes. Agatha, in particular, finds the festivities misplaced. She sees them as a distraction, convinced that preparation for the inevitable return of the devils is far more critical than celebrating. Prince Roland notices her unease and takes a moment to address her concerns. He tries to reassure her that one day of rest and celebration will not undermine their readiness for future battles. Offering her a glass of wine, he gently encourages her to relax and join the others, reminding her that victories, no matter how small, are worth acknowledging. As much as Agatha resists the idea of celebration, she reluctantly grabs the glass of fine wine from Prince's hand. Despite her stern outward mood, she allows herself to partake in the moment. The mood lightens further when Wendy unveils the highlight of the event, the giant cake especially produced for this very occasion. After the arrival of the cake, laughter and joy fill the courtyard as everyone indulges in the rare luxury. It becomes a night to remember, a heartfelt celebration of their shared efforts. After the festivities wind down, Prince Roland retreats to his room, only to find Anna waiting for him in the corridor outside. Prince then reveals a special gift he has prepared for Anna, which is a sigil crafted with 2 magical stones. One is a pathfinding stone, and the other a waypoint stone. When combined with magic, the sigil becomes a tracking device, allowing Anna to find him no matter where he is. With nervousness and sincerity plastered all over his face, Roland finally confesses his feelings and proposes marriage. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for has finally arrived. As for Anna, she's overwhelmed with emotions. She had dreamed of this day for so long, and now that it's a reality, tears stream down her face. It goes without saying that she says yes and reciprocates his feelings. In the quiet of the night, they spend some intimate time together, but since we don't need to get age-restricted, we'll skip ahead to the next morning. The prince wakes up, clearly disoriented. He's alone in his room and has no idea where Anna went. For a moment, he wonders if what happened last night was just a dream, but when he spots Anna's hair over the bed, he's convinced it was real. He quickly rolls over onto the blankets, hoping to catch her scent, but just as he starts to get a little creepy, Anna appears behind him. She scares him as she brings in some food. After setting the breakfast down, she tells him to eat well to regain his strength. But the prince insists on taking a few more days off for some extra fun. Anna shuts that idea down quickly. Like Agatha, she reminds him that they still have to fight the devils. Soraya and Agatha are working hard for this very reason, and she doesn't want to fall behind. Later, Princess Tilly comes to visit the prince. Seeing how cheerful he looks, she can't help but tease him, thinking he must have had a pleasant dream to be so happy. However, she quickly moves on to the real reason for her visit. Sadly, she is here to say farewell because it's finally time for her to return to Slumber Island. She has stayed here long enough and has kept in touch with the island only through letters. Now that the months of demons are over, her mission is complete. The prince suggests that she consider moving to Western Region instead. With the large expanse of land on the southern bank of the Redwater River, there's more than enough space to house all her witches. But Tilly reminds him that they've already discussed this, and her decision to return to Slumber Island hasn't changed. Despite this, the prince asks her to stay at least another week. He wants time to prepare something for her and the witches, a collection of books, study guides, and practice problems to help improve their learning and save them time. He also suggests she take some revolvers for protection in case they run into enemies wielding stones of divine judgment. He promises to send her steam engines as well, explaining they'll be useful for everything from irrigation to desalination. But the biggest reason he wants her to stay is so she can witness the grand opening of Neverwinter City with him. He hopes she can be there for the creation of the city, something he's been waiting to share with her. Later, Wendy comes across Nightingale sitting in a quiet corner, looking completely dejected. It's clear she hasn't slept at all. The expression on Nightingale's face is so full of devastation that it reminds Wendy of the day they first met. The cause of Nightingale's heartbreak is quite evident. It's troubling her that the prince is now finally with Anna. What makes it even harder to bear is that Nightingale herself had encouraged the prince to take that step. Although she insists she was prepared for this and always knew it was inevitable, the weight of reality has hit her harder than she expected. Wendy feels deeply concerned for her friend. Nightingale's broken state reminds her of the past, of the times when they had faced so much together. Nightingale had always been so brave, fighting countless battles without flinching and never showing fear, not even before Kara, as terrifying as she was. Yet now, this pain has completely shattered her. Wendy knows her friend needs comfort more than anything. She gently urges Nightingale to cry as much as she needs, letting her release the pain she's been holding in. Wendy then reflects on their shared reality. They have nowhere else to go and no one else to turn to. Staying by the prince's side is their only option, even if it comes with its challenges. Wendy reflects aloud that while everyone can enjoy the warmth of the sun, the closer you get, the more you risk being burned. It's a bitter truth they both must live with, but she promises to stay by Nightingale's side, offering whatever support she can. Wendy urges Nightingale to give up and move on, reminding her that she already has her sisters to support her. But Nightingale refuses, making it clear that she won't let the prince go so easily. No matter what, she is determined to protect him until the very end. This is her decision, and she won't back down. As spring blooms in full swing, people gather to celebrate the wedding of Miss May and the prince's knight, Carter. The couple looks stunning in their outfits, radiating joy as they make their way to the beautiful gazebo. Once they arrive, Bravo officiates the ceremony and prompts them to exchange rings. When they do, the moment becomes electric with emotion, and the crowd erupts in happiness. Carter, however, hesitates when it's time for the kiss, his nervousness causing him to tremble as he inches closer to Miss May. But Miss May takes the lead, and leaps forward to kiss him and save him from further awkwardness. Among them, Soraya busily paints each scene, determined to immortalize the memory through her art. After the ceremony, the prince offers his congratulations and announces a small but thoughtful gift: 2 days of vacation for Carter. He assures him that he'll take care of any pressing work so Carter and May can enjoy their time together. The wedding concludes successfully, with everyone showering the couple with blessings and happiness. The prince stands close to his beloved, holding her hand tightly as he quietly expresses that he too dreams of the day they'll share such a moment. Though surrounded by joy, Nightingale watches from the sidelines, her heart heavy and broken. All she can do is endure the pain in silence as the world around her celebrates. The scene transitions to a few days later. While the prince is busy shaving his beard, Baroff reports that the messenger pigeon has been sent to Longsong Fortress and is expected to arrive at their castle within half an hour. The prince inquires about the preparations for the upcoming event. Baroff informs him that everything was completed yesterday afternoon, and the venue is large enough to accommodate everyone in town. Apparently, this event is no ordinary gathering. The prince plans to announce the establishment of a new city. To emphasize the significance of this milestone and how it will affect the citizens of both sides, the announcement will be coordinated with Longsong Fortress. Both locations will deliver the news simultaneously, highlighting their unity and shared progress. The prince expresses hope that Petrov will receive the letter promptly. As expected, the messenger pigeon eventually reaches Longsong Fortress, delivering the message to Petrov. With everything in place, the simultaneous announcements begin in both Longsong Fortress and Bordertown. The prince steps forward and formally greets the gathered crowd. He begins by expressing his belief that everyone present understands the significance of today's event. The small town, built on the slopes of the northern mines, will soon transform into a real city. He reflects on the past, reminding everyone of the annual nightmare that the months of demons once brought to Bordertown. However, they proved that they could stand their ground. He recounts their triumphs over their enemies: Osmond Ryan, who sought to disrupt the peace of the western region and met his downfall; the Church, which tried to oppress witches and enslave the people but was ultimately banished; and even Timothy Wimbledon, whose schemes failed to defeat him. The prince points out that Timothy set the southern and eastern regions ablaze, yet Bordertown remained unharmed, a living proof to their strength and resilience. He also speaks of the new king's atrocities, such as the sacking of Golden Wheat City, and the knights who acted no better than bandits. But the prince promises that such tragedies will no longer happen. This new city they are building represents their unity and strength. As long as the people stand together, no enemy will dare step foot in their lands. The prince vows to make their enemies pay for their wrongdoings. With pride and conviction, the prince announces that this place will become the new capital of Grey Castle. A new kingdom will be born here, one that will thrive even in the harshest winters. He assures the crowd that this city, no matter the season, will remain as warm and vibrant as spring. Finally, he declares that starting today, Bordertown and Longsong Fortress will unite as one, Neverwinter City. The crowd erupts in cheers, their voices echoing across the square as they wave the flags of their new city high in the air. Princess Tilly is also present in the ceremony, witnessing the grand inauguration. She feels a deep certainty that the spark the prince has ignited today will one day grow into a roaring flame, spreading across the entire continent and reshaping its future. The scene shifts to the filthy witch, Zero. She's apparently been learning all about the prince's exploits so far. Against all odds, he escaped the royal decree for the throne, managed to defend himself against his better-prepared siblings, and even came out on top. It's all pretty intriguing to her. Zero also learns from the fourth prince's memories that she tried to kill him by poisoning his food. The poison was colorless and odorless, definitely fatal, but it didn't affect him at all. His leadership has drastically changed since then. He's won the favor of all his citizens and has even transformed the western region on his own. If he weren't the fourth prince, she wonders what he could have become. This is all getting pretty interesting, and she's absolutely looking forward to acquiring Prince Roland. She wants to absorb him, make him part of the church, just as it should be. That's when Isabella shows up. When Zero asks how her meetings went, Isabella mentions that she had a hard time befuddling those old men again, plus one geezer and two lunatics. Zero reminds her that it's not just about befuddling them. This connects to the church's entire lower system. Witches may be the core of the church, but they can't gather all the resources they need without the mortals helping them achieve their final objective. Isabella finally relents but says that, according to the others, it'll take until the second month of summer to move the resources needed for an attack from dawn to Grey Castle. She then reveals, rather disappointedly, that they have only about 400,000 pills left in their warehouse. On top of that, Isabella isn't sure if it's a good idea to let mortals fight the devils. They're talking about millions of people, and using the pills would quickly deplete Hermes' entire stock. She worries the church might not even win. Once mortals take the pills, their value only lasts a day. They're useless if they don't take enough, but they die faster if they take more. Zero feels a little disappointed that Isabella doesn't seem to understand her point. She explains that she never intended to use their berserker army to defend Hermes. The final battle, she says, will most likely take place at the ruins of Tequila. When Isabella questions whether Zero is planning to attack first, Zero reveals her reasoning that time is their most precious resource. She never thought sweeping all the devils at once was possible. It's simply unrealistic. The divine texts mention that when the underworld gate opens during the red moon, the devils will build a towering black structure. However, this tower isn't built, it grows. The material used for this construction was only referenced in the readings of the Alliance's third seat, and the expansion of devil territory requires these towers to produce red mist. Past towers have always been built in locations rich in stones of divine judgment. An enormous monster lives beneath each tower, its body even thicker than Tequila itself. This monster digests the stones of divine judgment, turning them into black crystals that diffuse red mist. Isabella finds it disgusting, while Zero points out that she doesn't know how long it takes to digest the stones, but it definitely doesn't happen overnight. During this time, the devils can't build their tower here. They can only ship it from their homeland. Zero wants to carve a bloody path through the devils with the Berserker army, and then kill the buried monster with the Divine Judgment army. And if they're lucky, they might gain another 4 centuries of time. You see, the Berserker army just can't replace the Divine Judgment army. The drug they use also affects the mortal's consciousness, but it won't touch their emotions. Against a truly terrifying enemy, they'll still feel fear, or even retreat. A broken army of millions will leave them defenseless. Of course, it won't be that easy. The Berserker army will mostly be the lower followers of the church, but they'll be led by Divine Judgment soldiers. Unifying the kingdom is the only way to gain that many followers. Zero knows she has to gamble with humanity's fate and gather as many chips as possible. She tells Isabella not to fear the battle, because it's the unexpected rewards that are the sweetest. Their intelligence, bravery, belief, and sacrifice will determine their future, and this is what God wants to see. because the weak will never earn his smile. Isabella hopes for the best, though she is still curious about one thing. She wonders what would the fourth prince do if he were standing here right now. Zero dismisses the remark coldly. She's sure she won't fall against a mere human like Roland. But Isabella presses on with reason, pointing out that, according to Archbishop Tayfun, the pure witch he sent to Grey Castle still hasn't returned. She simply disappeared without a trace. Not only that, they also lost a Fura in the capital, Archbishop candidate Mila, and the Longsong Fortress Cathedral. She tries to give Zero a wake-up call, reminding her that this is one of their biggest losses. It's as if, ever since they started meddling with the Western region, they've never won, as if God himself is protecting it. Although Isabella didn't want to say this, the word slipped out anyway, and this only serves to enrage Zero beyond belief. She quickly shuts Isabella up, reminding her that mortals know nothing about God. Mortals can only rely on knowledge and tactics, and those will all become a part of her. She believes that even if Roland has a method to defeat the devils, the Alliance will do better. When the Church conquers Grey Castle, the Western region will witness who is truly God's child. Isabella grows concerned, seeing how much her friend has changed. Zero is beginning to resemble the Pope in some ways. On the other hand, Zero is still shaken by the unsettling thought that Roland might actually be under some form of protection by the gods. As Isabella leaves the room, Zero reflects on how, no matter who the Pope is or who came up with the idea, anyone who enters the prayer room will drastically change. The highest level in the temple is the closest to God. She then walks into the temple, and after standing beneath the gazebo, she reveals that this is the only place where she can witness God's messages. She clasps her hands and begins her prayers. Her entire body begins to shimmer, and before her appears a demonic red eye. But according to her, this is supposed to be God's true form. The magic surrounding this supposed God is larger than the ocean, and its brilliance is brighter than the sun. This only reinforces her belief that only someone who wields such power could be God himself. This, she claims, is the red moon mentioned in the holy books. Through premonitions, she understands that humanity is weak and cannot protect anyone. The end of the Divine War is illustrated in 4 paintings. Once she enters the first picture, we see this throne, adorned with skulls. In the next picture, the city she wanders through is the origin of the devils, where they first appeared, on the northern peak of the Realm of Dawn. As she gazes at the throne, she reflects that she was supposed to find the protector of devils sitting there. But it's empty. It guards the secret of God. There are paintings, and according to the ancient records, it has been said that the contents of the second painting are subject to change. Some mention that it depicts a huge eyeball, while others say they saw bubbling volcanoes or an endless pit glowing at the bottom. No one sees the same thing, but as far as she can see, there is nothing. The Church's secret records once mentioned that in the early days of the First Divine War, there was something inside the other painting. When the war ended centuries later, the image faded to black. It makes her wonder if it's the aftermath of those rejected by God. Perhaps they are hiding something. As for the last painting, it's never been mentioned. If even the popes don't know about it, this secret could be lost forever. She starts to feel exhausted as she prays, and sadly for her, God did not respond today. She had thought that there would be nothing more to care about until she became pope, but her understanding of this world only skims the surface. There is a brand new secret in front of her, and her immortality is the perfect resource to chase it. She is truly the child chosen by God, and she can get closer. Centuries, even millennia, won't matter, because it will be worth it. I've got no clue what in the hell she just talked about all, but let's hope to soon get some context and figure out things. It's finally time for Tilly and her party to return, and the ship has arrived to take them. Andrea turns to the prince before boarding and says that she had a great time in the border town, but she's not sure if she'll be able to make the same ice cream bread when she gets back. In return, Prince promises to make even tastier food when she returns. That's when Ash chimes in with a verbal jab, telling the prince that they wouldn't mind if he kept Andrea for himself. After all, one less loudmouth on Slumber Island won't hurt anyone. Of course, both ladies immediately throw their usual jabs back at her, while the prince turns to his sister and tells her that if she runs into any problems on Slumber Island, she can let him know, and he'll do his best to help however he can. And, he adds, the city of Neverwinter will always welcome her return. Tilly thanks the prince and says she's also looking forward to him visiting Slumber Island as well. With that, the witches begin boarding the ship, and both Xavi and Andrea wave their hands for the last time. The prince seems quite dejected to see them go, and Nightingale quickly picks up on it, asking if he doesn't want to let them leave. The prince expresses how a bit jealous he feels. There are over 300 witches living on Slumber Island, and he wishes they could all move to the western region. But they shake off the gloomy thoughts and decide to move forward. On a sunny day in the Neverwinter, we meet the prince and Nightingale inside the office. Nightingale reports that the fortress rats are scuttling around again, which could push things out of control. The prince had expected this. Eradicating the rats will be a long process, with occasional surges, but as long as pressure is maintained while offering them better ways to live, they'll eventually disappear. That's the reason Petrov had mentioned he hoped the prince could provide help with skills and labor. Nightingale then asks if he intends to send her, as she doesn't seem too keen on leaving him alone behind. The prince reminds her that she is in charge of the security department, and she'll need to frequently travel between locations to oversee various jobs. But Nightingale worries that their enemies might send a witch assassin, and in that case, only she can protect him. The prince believes she's just overthinking, but Nightingale stubbornly sticks to her guns. No matter what he says, even Wendy and Scroll will stand by her side. That's when the prince reveals that he's going with her too. This finally calms Nightingale down, and the prince adds that she should bring Summer along as well, so she can learn how to use her abilities in practice. He also tells her to bring Sylvie and Soraya as they'll need to investigate the fortress mines and create an identification system. With that, the prince leaves Neverwinter with a select group of witches. Once they arrive, Petrov reports that they have a bigger issue at hand than the usual robberies and small crimes. There have been incidents that are more public, and they're happening against the police force the prince had deployed. According to Officer Wade, this should be called the Northern Outer District serial killer case. Renee further reveals that, starting 3 days ago, a civilian has been murdered every night. The victims were all male, lived alone with no family, and most importantly, all had received jobs from the city hall. A symbol was also painted in every room with blood, resembling a crown with an X later crossed over it. Since there was a symbol, Renee tried investigating the city hall and discovered that they were about to begin construction in the Redwater district. News of this had already spread through the northern streets, and people now believe that they will be killed once they accept jobs from the city hall. The number of applicants was already low, and now no one dares to sign up. In fact, a number of citizens want to quit their jobs as well. If this spreads to the other districts, it will be detrimental to their expansion plans. There were no witnesses, and no one knows where to begin the investigation. The prince questions Renee, asking how he solved something like this in the past. Renee reveals that the patrol never had a solid protocol. If it was a big problem, the victims' families would appeal to the city lord, and the lord would promise justice for the people. Only then would the patrol be pressured to make the criminals hand themselves over. The patrol, however, never cared if they were scapegoats or not, and they ignored victims who were foreigners or loners. That sounds quite horrible to the prince. You see, from what he's heard, this means almost everything is under the rats' control, so it's no wonder they were considered vital to the city. The prince has also observed that this world doesn't seem to have investigators. If there are no witnesses, it always results in a cold case. The prince quickly gives Petrov good news, telling him that the Department of Security will handle the case tomorrow. All he wants from Renee and Petrov is their cooperation. Nightingale then asks about his plans for this, to which the prince explains that he's not going to be directly involved. He needs to supervise the aristocrats on building the second city hall. The sooner he can finish that, the sooner Soraya can start making the ID cards. So the case is up to her now. He tells her that she will be in charge of the Department of Security and needs to decide how to crack the case. The entire police force of Neverwinter will eventually be hers to control. Wade, Renee, and anyone else will answer to her. But Nightingale reminds him that he was the one who told her that departments need to be balanced in power, and she doesn't fully understand how the city hall works. Wouldn't the Department of Security be lower in rank than the city hall? The prince places his hand over Nightingale's, startling her a little. He reminds her that the security of their land is more important than anything else, which is why she answers directly to him. It's also why she will control both the police force and any investigations involving the city hall or the military. All of their departments need to be tightly connected by a big net to prevent internal corruption. There's a saying that the strongest defenses always start to decay from the inside, and she will be the one to shield them from that happening. Seeing him putting so much faith in her just makes her feel flustered, and now she is looking forward even more to live up to his expectations. Later that night, overcome with excitement, she practically strangles Summer as she tells her they're going to catch all the criminals and make sure they never return to Neverwinter again. As Nightingale begins to plan their next steps, she tells Summer that her job will be to recreate the crime scenes. However, Summer objects, pointing out that she won't know what time of day the crime occurred, so how can she accurately recreate the scene? Also, after a week of practicing with Miss Wendy, she can only use her abilities 4 times a day. If she extends the duration of the illusions, that number goes down. Furthermore, she can't keep it up for more than 2 days at a time, or her exhaustion becomes overwhelming. Nightingale grows concerned. It'll be a problem if their recreations don't accurately reflect the criminal's presence at the crime scene. She then asks Summer if shortening the duration of her recreations would allow her to use them more frequently. Summer responds in a roundabout way that her magic drains quickly, and it won't make much difference. This makes Nightingale appreciate Spearpassy's power transfer ability even more. But since they don't have another option, She decides to take a gamble, predict a time, and hope for the best. She claims that her luck has always been good. After all, it's how she met Prince Roland. With that, the both ladies settle into bed. Morning arrives, and Renee formally introduces himself as Earl Renee Meade, at Nightingale's service under Prince Roland's orders. Nightingale reciprocates the gesture, introducing Summer as her assistant and witch. Renee expresses his eagerness to work with the two witches to find and capture the criminals. With that, the investigation begins. Nightingale requests that Renee take them to the crime scene. As Renee leads them toward their destination, Summer feels nervous being around someone of Renee's status. Nightingale reassures her that in Prince Roland's territory, titles don't carry much weight. She should not be afraid, as Renee would not belittle her. Moreover, the Department of Security is more important than the City Hall, making them his superior. As they walk, Renee shares that there was another victim last night, this time at the intersection between North and West Street. This marks the fourth murder, with each location being different. The killer appears to understand that staying in one area would be risky, especially now that the rats are no longer present. Once they enter the restricted crime scene, Summer is horrified by the sight of the old man's body brutally killed and lying on the ground. She trembles, feeling sick, and Renee suggests she step outside for some fresh air. Nightingale asks Renee when the body was discovered. Renee explains that it was this morning, when civilians came to fetch water. They found the corpse and noticed the door was left open, almost as if the killer wanted to make sure everyone saw it. In the past, it might have taken 2 or 3 days to report. But thanks to the City Hall offering rewards for information, someone immediately reported it. The victim's name is Pickaxe, a free citizen with no known ties to anyone or anything, which underscores that he might have been a rat in a past life. Nightingale then inquires if anyone saw him the previous night. Renee confirms that he asked around, but no one saw anything, and no one heard anything either. After thinking it over, Nightingale concludes that killing an adult like this would have made noise. Pickaxe didn't die immediately from a slit throat. He must have struggled or at least thumped against the floor, making a significant sound. She then questions whether the witnesses could have lied. Renee doesn't believe that's likely. The civilians are too fearful to lie, and since anyone who helps the police is rewarded, they don't have a reason to do so. Nightingale decides to call everyone who was nearby and conduct her own questioning. She then turns to Summer, instructing her to go to the castle and bring Soraya. Later, we find Nightingale standing in frustration, because not only Soraya but also the other 2 girls have barged in uninvited in the midst of such a serious criminal investigation. She scolds Lightning sharply while asking whether she isn't supposed to be protecting Prince Roland while she's away. Lightning explains that Prince Roland is engaged in a conference with the elites in the Grand Castle Hall, so he's not in any danger. Furthermore, Sylvie is still present, and with her around, no one would dare approach the prince. Despite this, Nightingale fumes with anger and orders them to return to the prince before the conference concludes. Back to the investigation, Nightingale gives Soraya the task of drawing the killer. Summer replay the murder, and Soraya will use her abilities to produce the visuals of the killer's face. Renee believes that if they can obtain a clear image, they should plaster it across the billboards in the fortress, as that's the fastest way to catch the criminal. However, Nightingale points out that it may not work as planned, especially considering the limitations of Summer's illusions. They will need to be lucky for it to find the exact time when the crime took place. She then tells Summer to replay the events between midnight and dawn. When Summer begins to replay the events, they see the old man sleeping peacefully in his bed. Nightingale instructs Summer to extend the timeline slightly after midnight, as the killer would have needed extra time to draw the symbol after the murder. As soon as Summer does this, the killer materializes, who is busy drawing the symbol on the wall with the old man's blood. However, they can only see the killer's back since he is facing the wall. Nightingale instructs Summer to replay the events just before the man was facing the wall. After doing so, they finally get to see the killer's face. Well, it seems like Bro has been caught in Ultra 4K. The story continues, and thanks to Summer, everyone at the crime scene finally sees the criminal behind the murder. Poor Summer feels exhausted after pushing herself, but once again, because of her efforts, we get a clear look at the person responsible for these murders in this joint. They notice that the victim didn't resist at all, as if he had been asleep the whole time. This leads Renee to believe he was possibly drugged with dream water. Soraya agrees, as it's the only explanation for why Pickaxe didn't even make a sound. His throat was slit, but only enough to draw blood, because Pickaxe had already been dead long before. Suddenly, a police officer reports back, claiming to have found out the murderer's identity. The officer states that the killer's name is Manes, and that he used to be part of the patrol. This officer knows this because he had worked with that killer before. Manes lives in the inner city district, near West Street and the Sheep Pub. Nightingale is pleased with the report. Now that they know who the criminal is, they won't have to waste time searching for him. With that, Nightingale decides to raid his house. Later, They arrive at his place and find him sleeping soundly. But his sleep is quickly interrupted when the officers arrest him and tie him down. Renee breaks it down to this bastard that he's under arrest, then grabs him by the hair and slams him to the ground. Renee is absolutely furious to see this traitor who is plotting against Prince Roland's plans. He wants this bastard to hang at the city gate as a clear warning to other criminals who might harbor ill intentions. But the bastard tries to run his mouth, denying the accusations. That's when Renee punches him hard enough that teeth fly from his mouth, sending him crashing down. Renee lets him know that they've seen everything with their own eyes, so there's no room for argument. This is when Nightingale steps forward to continue the interrogation. She asks him about the mastermind who wants to kill the rats who applied for jobs, and the meaning behind those paintings on the walls, the crown marked with a cross. Not to mention, the dream water mains fed to the victims isn't cheap, and it's even harder to buy now that the rats are gone. Renee roars at the bastard to start spilling everything, or else he'll face the wrath of the elites. But the bastard stays silent, so Renee keeps punching him. Finally, Mayonnaise speaks up and owns up to all the atrocities he's committed. He claims that someone in the inner district had tasked him with the job. The mastermind offered him 4 golden royals for every person killed, and further assured him that civilians would end up hating the police for it. If they killed enough people, the common folk would start believing that the police didn't have enough power to protect them, and the patrol would make a comeback. Mayonnaise admits he doesn't know exactly why the mastermind chose him for the job. They had met at the pub, where the mastermind handed him a bottle of dream water and told him he'd strike it big if he followed the instructions. Mayonnaise claims he had no savings, and after his application to the police force was rejected, he was left jobless, filled with resentment toward the police. That's why he did something he clearly shouldn't have. Nightingale then questions the bastard, asking if he knows anything else about the mastermind. He denies it, pretending he has no idea. This gets Nightingale worked up because she's sure he's lying. That's when Renee warns the bastard that Nightingale is a witch and can easily see through lies. Mayonnaise insists that the mastermind never told him his name, so he can't confirm anything about him. However, he admits that the mastermind didn't seem like an elite. When they met 2 days ago, the man was in a rush. Then, he suddenly remembers the uniform the man was wearing. It had a symbol that looked like a flower petal. The mention of a flower petal instantly reminds Renee of the honeysuckle crest. The man claims he doesn't know the full details, which is why he was trying to avoid spreading any misinformation. After all, why would the honeysuckle family harm the prince when they are his protectors? Renee is also sure that Petrov wouldn't do something like this, so it has to be someone else. He then decides to wait for the next meeting between him and the mastermind. When that happens, they'll capture the person behind these killings. Meanwhile, Nightingale notices that Maynes doesn't seem to be lying about anything. That's when Detective Lightning and Maggie arrive on the scene, informing them that the prince's meeting with the fortress officials is over, so they should be heading back. The mention of the meeting jolts Nightingale out of her thoughts as a realization sinks in. She reflects on the fact that the prince is currently meeting with the elites to discuss the new city hall. That means no one is guarding him. He's been left inside the conference room with no guards. If the killer is really the member of Honeysuckle family, he would definitely have access to approach the prince. Seeing the urgency of the situation, she quickly tells Lightning to take her to the prince immediately. And so, they speed through the sky above the streets, confident they'll arrive within 3 minutes. Nightingale feels tense with each passing minute. The murders started 3 days ago, the same time Petrov's letter arrived at Border Town. It all feels suspicious to her, as if they had always been waiting for the perfect opportunity to catch the prince alone, with no one around. And so, as we see, Roland has been pierced by a sword. Nightingale rushes to the scene, but when she gets there, she finds a body on the ground. Tears well up in her eyes as she thinks that Roland is dead. She watches as the officers arrive and turn the body over, only to reveal that it's actually the assassin who got screwed instead. He was a guard from the Honeysuckle family. Just then, Prince Roland catches everyone's attention, and without a second thought, Nightingale throws herself into his arms, hugging him tightly. Roland then turns to the panicked crowd in order to calm them down. He instructs everyone to carry on with the lunch and stay inside the castle, as the meeting will continue in the afternoon. A while later, Nightingale fills Prince Roland in on everything. How the serial killer, Maynes, was linked to this assassination attempt. She explains that they found out a guard from Honeysuckle was behind the attack, which is why they rushed over immediately. Their plan was to create a diversion, giving the assassin a perfect chance to strike the prince. She's relieved beyond words that he's safe. Roland, however, is visibly disappointed. Petrov, standing nearby, looks equally guilty, admitting that he had no idea something like this would happen. The prince reassures him and tells him to rise, stating that he doesn't like placing blame. However, he does point out that it is Petrov's fault for leaving holes in security and failing to properly vet his personnel. He then orders Petrov to investigate the assassin's identity and origins, and he wants answers as soon as possible. Once Petrov leaves, Roland explains that it was thanks to Sylvie's immediate warning that he was able to escape in time. He also admits that the assassins made a dumb mistake attempting the attack inside the conference hall. Even though no weapons were allowed, the assassin was still a guard, and he managed to hide a dagger in his clothes to bypass the pat-down. Another misstep on his part was carrying a stone of divine judgment. While it was common for guards to wear one while patrolling outside, it made him stand out too much in the room, especially since no elite was allowed to carry a stone. The slight gap in the crowd gave Sylvie just enough time to notice him immediately. With her warning, Roland drew his revolver and flicked the safety off. Though the prince was stabbed, the blade failed to pierce Soraya's special cloth, which saved his life. Wasting no time, Roland fired at nearly point-blank range. Two 12mm bullets tore through the assassin, killing him instantly. The situation was over before it could spiral out of control. But Nightingale still feels uneasy about all of this. If he hadn't managed to flick the safety off in time, or if the revolver had malfunctioned, Roland would have been doomed. Her frustration shifts to Lightning, who had left the prince alone in the first place. Poor Lightning, who only wanted to play detective, nearly bursts into tears as she apologizes over and over. She swears she'll never leave the prince unguarded again. Next time, she'll stay at her post, no matter what. But Nightingale still insists that the prince punish Lightning and Maggie for failing to carry out their assigned duty. If Lightning had been there, she could have picked him up and flown him away. However, Roland doesn't believe strict punishment is necessary. Still, Nightingale keeps pressing the issue. Eventually, the prince gives in and decides on a punishment for Lightning. She will have to complete 3 exercises in math and science after lunch. Of course, this punishment is as brutal as it gets, leaving poor Lightning completely shocked. The aftermath of the shock is so severe that her muscles stop working from sheer disbelief, forcing Sylvie to drag her away. Later, Nightingale starts feeling remorseful that she wasn't there to protect the prince herself. But Roland reassures her that she did everything perfectly. He gives her a different perspective. He points out that the only reason the assassin, Sheo, attempted to kill him in the conference hall was because there was a powerful witch protecting him. Diverting her was the only way for the killer to even have a chance. But Nightingale still doesn't like the fact that the killer almost succeeded in his assassination attempt. Roland, however, doesn't see it that way. He believes failure is failure, and the only reason the assassin failed was because of her. He thanks her for all the effort she has put in, and tells her that he truly appreciates her concern. Finally, Nightingale feels at ease. She smiles, acknowledging his words. The investigation concluded that the assassin, Sheo, was not from the Western region, and used to be one of Duke Ryan's patrol soldiers. But Petrov and Nightingale theorized that this assassination wasn't out of Duke Ryan's revenge. Sheo's residence was locked down, because only Summer's replay magic could reveal the truth. He had asked Maggie to bring Miss Spear Passy to the fortress castle. Later, Maggie brought Spear Passy there. After dinner, they followed the Elk Earl to Sheo's house, which was a normal townhouse in the inner district. It had been completely cleaned out, not even a single piece of paper was left behind. The criminal had obviously prepared in advance to destroy all evidence. The prince told Summer that Sheo was usually out during the day, so she only needed to replay what happened at night. He needed to see everything that took place in this room, starting from when Sheo contacted Mayonnaise. Every moment was important. Spear Passy then began her mojo, borrowing Maggie's magic and transferring it to Summer so she could hold her magic longer. The prince was sure that with Maggie's extra magic, Summer wouldn't miss a single detail, and Soraya's real-time drawings would keep a record of everything in case they forgot. In the replay, the prince notices a piece of familiar jewelry, and told Soraya to draw it because he had seen it before. It might be something special. After painting it, she shows it to the prince. It turns out to be a jewel, engraved with the Star Tower and spears, which is the crest of the royal court. This leads Nightingale to believe that perhaps Sheo was sent by Timothy. But Prince Roland believes this jewel actually belonged to the king, Wimbledon, his father. Nightingale reminds him that Wimbledon was supposed to have been killed by the first prince, Gerald. However, the prince claims that he has seen this before in his father's office. When he asked about it, his father explained that every jewel represents a brave warrior loyal to the castle. The more jewels there were, the more stable the Wimbledon throne was. This means Sheo was probably a sleeper agent appointed to Duke Ryan's side, monitoring the entire western region. Renee then questions why Sheo would try to kill him. In response, the prince theorizes that Timothy likely found the list of rings. Once he had a ring that represented Sheo, Sheo had no choice but to carry out Timothy's order, even if it was meant to assassinate Prince Roland. The crest means everything to them, and they would do anything for it. In the end, Sheo throws the crest away and destroys it, because in his eyes, if there is no crest, then there will not be any orders either. Later that night, Nightingale sneaks out of her room and quietly lays beside the prince. She feels guilty coming here, especially since Anna has a relationship with him, but she can't resist anymore. The next day arrives, and Prince Roland wakes up, totally tired. He notices that breakfast is already there, and it seems Nightingale was the one who brought it. Seeing how Nightingale is in an unusually good mood, he asks her out of curiosity, wondering if she had a sweet dream. Well, what she did last night was nothing short of a dream, so she confirms his guess. He then reminds her that she will be accompanying him today. He argues that if Timothy really used the list of rings, there may be sleeper agents elsewhere in the western region, and he can't interrogate everyone himself. Not to mention, some of these sleeper agents should not be wasted on Timothy's orders, as they have higher potential than that. Nightingale is ready to follow him wherever he wants to go. That's when he shares with her that they're heading to the mines and the salt wells, and it's one of the main reasons he came here. Later, they arrive at the mines, where they meet a man named Denver, who acts as their guide. He reveals that many generations have worked around these mines, and the hunters who first discovered them were his ancestors. The Kelly family has served 3 dukes, and their maps are as tall as a person, and no one knows the mines better than they do. The prince then inquires about why no one is working now. Denver explains that it's because of the months of demons. Since they only recently ended, the snow around the mountains has melted into the tunnels, flooding the deeper sections. Though the mines have drains and wells in place, they fill up too quickly for them to siphon the water away, so operations are temporarily shut down. According to precedent, they can only start working again in the summer. The prince is confident that a few steam engines would be enough to siphon the water. Since Denver doesn't seem to know about steam engines, the prince elaborates, explaining that a steam engine is a machine that can keep the mines running all year round. With that settled, the prince decides to proceed further. But before they go deeper inside, Denver stops the prince and presents him with a gift on behalf of the Kelly family. The box contains an exquisite rainbow stone, selected from the purest crystals. Its history stretches back centuries. When the prince opens the box, the brilliance of the object inside shines brightly, leaving him in awe. Then, suddenly, it dawns on him that this crystal seems familiar, something he had seen in his previous world. He remembers that this crystal was called diaspore. When diaspore reaches the quality of a jewel, it becomes incredibly shiny under extreme heat. Its mix of red and green is striking, which explains why people likened it to a rainbow. When diaspore loses its moisture, it transforms into corundum, which can then turn into valuable gems like rubies and sapphires. The prince then questions Denver about the remnants surrounding the stone when they dug it up. He wants to know what they did with the rocks, mud, and everything else they extracted along with it. Denver reveals that they simply piled them up at the foot of the mountain after sorting them out, discarding anything too impure or cracked to be made into jewels. But the prince confidently tells him that this is where they've been mistaken. If he's being honest, what they threw away is actually the real treasure. You see, diaspore is mostly made of aluminum oxide, and since it's a byproduct of bauxite, that means this place is rich in aluminum. The discarded rocks and mud are actually the raw materials for smelting, and aluminum is infinitely useful. Compared to iron, aluminum's low density and anti-corrosive properties make it a vital material in industry and transportation technology. Aluminum is also promising as a weapon material in this world, particularly for large airships. While the prince originally planned to prioritize other iron mines, this tunnel has been an unexpected surprise. So, he decides to adjust his plans and explore this one first. The scene then transitions to Slumber Island, where the ship carrying Princess Tilly and the other witches has finally arrived at the dock. To welcome her, the witches of Slumber Island excitedly rush toward her, jumping into her arms in order to exchange warm hugs, as they had missed her dearly. As Tilly shares warm hugs with her sisters, she has a profound realization. No matter what happens, this will always be her true home, a territory created by witches for witches. Then, a green-haired witch, Camellia, steps forward to greet her. Princess Tilly is glad to see her as well and thanks her for managing the territory in her absence. Camellia assures her that everything has gone smoothly. She believes constructing the slumber spell was definitely a great idea. While she plans to report the details later, for now, she insists that Tilly get some rest. As the witches begin unloading all the souvenirs Tilly brought from Border Town, they also find a stash of books among the cargo. The witches aren't exactly thrilled to see these thick books, especially since they had been expecting gifts like soap, perfume, or something more exciting. Camellia then turns to Princess Tilly and questions if she intends to teach everyone from these books. To which Princess Tilly responds positively. After all, gathering knowledge and broadening one's horizons is the only way to grow stronger. That's when Thunder speaks up, pointing out that widespread education isn't a simple task. It requires a lot of money and time, and when people put down their tools to study, a portion of the labor force is temporarily lost. Unlike business, the results aren't immediate. It requires patience and consistency. But Tilly firmly believes that education can bring incredible change, even for commoners. The two then exchange greetings since they haven't seen each other in a long time. Thunder takes the opportunity to ask about her trip to the western region, curious if she found the answers she was looking for. Princess Tilly admits that she still hasn't gotten the answers she sought, as the prince remains very secretive and omits information very carefully, but she was amazed to see how the western region is flourishing under his rule. Meanwhile, the witches discover the stuffed toy Roland had gifted to his sister, and they all swoon over how soft it is. Wanting to avoid being bombarded with endless questions from the other witches, Tilly decides she'd rather hear Camelia's report first. In the office, Thunder also gets the chance to read all the valuable information Tilly managed to gather. It contains everything, from the existence of devils to the revelation that the ruins were actually created by witches. Not only that, but Bordertown also discovered an ancient witch who has been alive for 400 years. The sheer amount of information is overwhelming, and Thunder is forced to admit that Tilly has learned more on this trip than he has in his entire life. Tilly then asks for Thunder's thoughts on the devils, wondering if he finds anything particularly frightening. He admits that he does feel a little spooked, but compared to his burning passion for exploration, that fear is nothing. Being an adventurer and explorer through and through, he's now itching to see that so-called living fossil from 400 years ago. Tilly finds it ironic that this guy wants to visit Bordertown not to reunite with his daughter, but to meet Agatha instead. Thunder then proceeds to share his latest exploits from his recent expedition east of the sea line. There, he witnessed a cliff formed entirely by seawater, where ships could somehow sail on vertical water. What's even more incredible is that he managed to climb the cliff and watch the entire process of the tide in action. As the current sped up, the ship started plummeting toward the lowest point of the cliff. If Molly hadn't protected it, the impact alone would have snapped the ship in half. He kept turning the wheel, trying to steer toward the rushing water. Coincidentally, a strong wind was pushing against it, creating a fascinating balance between the two forces. The ship couldn't move forward another step, yet it wasn't being pushed down the cliff either. But based on his observations, even if the ship had been pushed off, it would have been just like climbing up, but in reverse. It would have simply landed at the lower part of the cliff. The whirlpool eventually filled up, and from the top of the sea line, they were able to witness the entire phenomenon unfold. The height of the sea line shrank while the sea level rose, and that, Thunder reveals, is the truth behind the tides. The sight was extraordinary. From a distance, it looked as if they were stuck on the side of a cliff, with their sails perfectly parallel to the sea's surface, like they could fall at any moment. Tilly struggles to make sense of it, but Thunder insists he saw everything with his own eyes. Half a month later, the tide began to recede at the same time as Phantom Island did. He asks if she remembers that place where the sea level drops rapidly, as if there's a massive hole at the bottom swallowing all the water. Tilly, however, dismisses it as just a theory. No one really knows what the seafloor looks like. But Thunder pushes forward, asking her why she thinks this part of the ocean is called the Whirlpool Seas. He reminds her that she mentioned how the continent was ruled by witches 400 years ago, so maybe the name itself comes from an even earlier time period. Tilly has to admit that he's making some solid points, but she argues that they don't have the means to explore the bottom of the ocean. No one on Slumber Island can do something like that, and proving such a theory would be incredibly difficult. But Thunder claims he knows someone. There's a witch who lives in the bay, one who hasn't interacted with humans in a long time. She was once a good friend of his, helping him during his expeditions. But ever since her abilities awakened, she bid farewell to the land. Sometimes you can hear her song drifting through the fog out at sea. This jogs a memory for Tilly. She wants Thunder to confirm it if he's referring to the rumors about a mermaid who guides ships through the ocean. Thunder confirms this. He further admits he's not sure if she'll be willing to help, but they have to try. He might also need the assistance of his old friend, Margaret. For this expedition, he wants to hear more about the new ships in Bordertown. He's heard they don't require wind to sail, which would be incredibly useful for his expeditions. Money isn't an issue, and the sooner he gets his hands on one, the better. So he asks Tilly if she can send a letter of purchase to Prince Roland on his behalf. He also makes one more request. He doesn't want his daughter finding out about his adventures. Tilly understands his reasoning and assures him she won't say a word. The scene transitions to Longsong Fortress, where a newly revolutionized ship designed by the prince is docked. Thousands of people are lined up, eager for a chance to board and sail to Bordertown. Some hesitate, uncertain about moving to such an unfamiliar place. But many see it as an opportunity of better jobs, higher wages, and the chance to earn more silver. And who wouldn't want extra money? Some dream of making enough to buy themselves a bicycle. Meanwhile, Prince Roland is busy guiding Petrov before his departure for Bordertown. He goes over the assignments Petrov needs to handle and, after ensuring all responsibilities are properly handed over, he finally boards the ship. With only a week left until the spring assault, Roland feels relieved knowing Iron Axe is taking care of the military preparations in advance. Their main focus right now should be on crop production. If they plant their spring seeds diligently, they will have enough food stockpiled to feel secure. Nightingale also expresses her confidence in their agriculture efforts. With both their agricultural director and Leif's Gold 1 ability, she believes they are set for a successful harvest. Roland, however, reminds her that their spring assault has another surprise in store, one that will be revealed soon enough. Once they return to Border Town, we find Anna working on the construction of a new ship. She is pleased to see Roland back and, naturally, he asks about the progress of the project. Anna describes the numerous challenges they faced during construction, but confidently states that she has resolved all of them. This leaves Roland genuinely surprised. The issues she mentioned were far too complex for the average person to solve, yet she handled them effortlessly. She then asks him if he has a name in mind for the ship, but Roland admits he hasn't thought of one yet. The reason Anna asks about the ship's name is that First Army soldiers have been coming by every few days to admire the vessel. Some of them even argued about engraving their names onto the hull, claiming that Roland had promised to name a warship after the best artillery soldier. However, Roland dismisses the idea, stating that this particular ship will not be named after an individual. The first warship's name will not only symbolize itself, but also represent its entire class. He refuses to grant such a significant honor to a single person. With that settled, they decide to simply call it Roland, officially naming it Roland 1 Warship. The scene then shifts to the capital, where a group of men, including this guy in a red coat, and he is always staying in the capital in order to keep an eye over any move Timothy makes, and report it to the prince as soon as possible. Everyone refers to him as Tassa. The discussion revolves around Timothy's latest move. It seems Timothy has begun his offensive, sending a fleet of 500 men to blockade the Redwater River, aiming to cut off Border Town's trade routes. The fleet consists of 4 battleships and 200 fully equipped soldiers, reinforcing the blockade. Tassa is determined to report this development to Prince Roland as soon as possible. However, before doing so, he takes a moment to read a message he has just received from the prince. After reading it, he reassures his fellow members that they no longer need to worry. Prince Roland, along with the First Army, has already set sail, and their target is none other than the capital itself. The scene transitions back to Prince Roland. Nightingale appears, immediately noticing how unusually happy he seems. She assumes that his good mood must come from the fact that he will finally see his home after such a long time. But Roland denies it, stating that the Western region is his only true home. He insists that his happiness comes from knowing that he will soon be able to end this conflict with Timothy once and for all. Of course, Nightingale, with her ability to detect lies, knows better. A faint blush creeps onto her face as she calls him out for lying. Exposed, Roland finally admits the real reason for his happiness. He is simply satisfied with the fact that he managed to establish so many warships in just 1 month. Nightingale then shifts the conversation. She sincerely thanks him. She is grateful that he is bringing an end to the conflict and stabilizing Greycastle. Under his rule, both mortals and witches will finally be able to live in peace. She had always believed in him, but she never expected this day to come so soon. However, Roland reminds her that victory will not come instantly. Even if he defeats Timothy, there will still be remnants of the elite who resist or struggle against his rule. Fully unifying Greycastle may take years. Hearing this, she quietly worries that she might not live long enough to see that future. But before she can dwell on the thought any longer, Roland swiftly flicks her forehead. No talk of dying is allowed here because he would never let her go so easily. Nightingale argues that as a battle witch, she is always on the front lines. The possibility of dying early is something she has already accepted. Proudly, she reaffirms her commitment, stating that she has already pledged her loyalty to Roland, and would willingly sacrifice herself for him if necessary. But Roland immediately dismisses such thoughts. He assures her that the only ones who will be making sacrifices will be their enemies. Just then, Lightning arrives in order to report urgent news. She reveals that 4 sailboats are approaching from 20 kilometers away. With oars on both sides, it is highly likely that they are the eagle-headed boats mentioned in the letter. Roland gives her an approving pat for her surveillance skills. He also corrects her that the word eagle likely refers to a battering ram hidden below the waterline. Feeling proud of herself, Lightning cheekily demands a reward for her efforts. She wants one of her school assignments to be excused. After some back and forth, Roland reluctantly agrees, but with one condition: she must not slack off like last time. As Lightning beams with joy, Nightingale thinks that he should not have given in so easily. But Roland simply smiles. To him, small acts of mercy are what make people remember kindness. With that settled, he turns serious once more. There is work to be done. According to Tassa's reports, Timothy has sent 4 galleys. Their speed is roughly the same as Roland's concrete ships, but they have the advantage of agility. These ships are designed for ramming and boarding enemy ships, and they could also potentially be used for suicide attacks. Given that the enemy is trying to blockade their waterways, Roland dismisses the second possibility of a suicide attack. He firmly believes that this will be everyone's first naval battle, so he's open to any strategic suggestions from his commanders. One of the officers in the conference speaks up, pointing out that cannons are not very accurate against moving targets. Since both sides will be in constant motion, he recommends opening fire only when they are within 50 meters. He assures that his platoon can sink an enemy ship with each cannonball at that range. Another platoon leader counters this, explaining that cannon fire consumes a lot of ammunition, and only Miss Anna can manufacture it. He suggests waiting for the enemy to make the first move, and when they attempt to board, they can retaliate with heavy machine guns. Prince Roland, carefully weighing both opinions, turns to the captain for his perspective. The captain's response surprises everyone. He proposes a direct collision strategy. The other commanders are taken aback, but the captain elaborates. Our ships are large, fast, and made of steel. A wooden enemy ship would likely collapse from a simple collision or lose its mobility due to heavy damage. It looks like Roland is absolutely loving the idea, and he eventually locks on it. He commands them to sound the horns, ready to implement the daring plan. On the enemy side, Duke Eden and his crew begin to notice a strange black smoke rising on the horizon. At first, they assume it's a fire somewhere along the river, perhaps a merchant's ship caught in flames. These idiots just can't make sense of it, especially since they don't understand the concept of engines or the source of such smoke. As they continue to observe, they notice the ships traveling far too quickly for merchant vessels. There are no flags to identify them, which adds to the mystery. The speed at which they're moving along the river, effortlessly defying expectations, only deepens their confusion. Soon enough, the ship Roland 1 comes into full view. The enemy soldiers and commanders are left utterly stunned, their minds struggling to comprehend the massive, imposing steel vessel barreling toward them. It's unlike anything they've seen before. A ship of that size, that fast, and made of steel is a monstrosity in their eyes. The massive chunk of steel collides directly with the wooden ships in the blockade, and the results are catastrophic. The wooden boats, unable to withstand the sheer force of the collision, begin to sink rapidly. Duke Eden panics as he frantically orders the ship's captain to head for the shore. While running away, he dreads his fate and the severe consequences that will follow if he turns tail and flees. If he enters the capital like this, he'll have no chance of getting promoted. His only opportunity is to seize the traitor's warship and bring it to King Timothy. Even if it was created by devils, as long as it's manned by humans, he's convinced they still have a chance to win. So, he yells at his men to bring out the bows and torches. They're going to kill that bastard hiding in that metal shell. Whoever helps take down Roland and his ship, Eden promises them a gold royal. The offer is just as lucrative as it can get, so they charge full speed at our hero's warship once again. The bastards are armed with their long-range weapons, feeling smug, thinking victory is theirs. They start firing arrows and throwing bombs with everything they've got. But sadly for these primitive suckers, their arrows are utterly useless against the thick steel of the ship. Iron Axe quickly fires the machine gun mounted on the warship, and those bullets literally tear through the shields those bastards are holding. The barrage of bullets starts disintegrating the wooden boat structure, ripping through it like paper. As the relentless rain of bullets continues, all Eden can do is stand there, completely frozen. By all common sense, a massive weapon like the one our party has should have horrible reload speed and accuracy. So Eden has no idea how in the hell Prince Roland managed to create such a terrifying weapon. The only explanation he can think of is that this must be an invention of the devils. In the end, he gets drilled by a bullet too and sinks down along with his ship. The boys on the warship feel disappointed that the enemy got obliterated so easily. They were looking forward to flexing their muscles and showing what the artillery squad is made of. But their commander quickly reminds these idiots that they can't afford to waste ammo, especially considering how much effort Anna puts into making them. He assures them that everyone will get their time to shine, so they shouldn't feel too salty about it. The boys then start discussing among themselves how amazing it would be if they had a warship named after them. 2 days pass since that successful subjugation, and it looks like their warship is finally nearing the capital. But Lightning reports that the port appears to be heavily guarded by at least 100 men, and they look like civilian soldiers. Prince Roland is surprised to hear that only 100 men have been deployed at the port. You see, he had predicted that the first battle would happen near the port. To prevent his army from disembarking, soldiers with crossbows and hand cannons might be surrounding them at the riverbank. They could even have catapults ready. But now, Roland is starting to believe that the enemy has abandoned their huge advantage of the shoreline. He does admit that it was a wise move, but he also acknowledges that Timothy doesn't seem to understand the range and power of 150-55mm shells. He then asks Sylvie if any of the civilian soldiers are equipped with berserker pills, to which Sylvie replies that she didn't find anything like that, and they aren't even fully equipped with weapons. However, she notices something strange beneath the dirt. Apparently, the enemy has buried something down there. She can see canisters and barrels hidden under the port, filled with a black and gray powder. It doesn't take long for Roland to realize that it must be gunpowder. Now everything makes sense. The civilian army of 100 is simply disposable. Timothy wants Roland's soldiers to disembark and attack the port. And once the explosives are detonated, everyone, including Timothy's own men, will be blown to pieces. Since Timothy isn't capable of remote detonation, those poor soldiers are there to do it manually. Roland immediately instructs Sylvie to locate the fuses and the soldiers manning them. As for Nightingale, Roland gives her the task of sneaking in, taking out the fuse operators, and watching the gate to prevent anyone else from detonating the gunpowder. Later, he plans to destroy the fuses using their cannons. Now let's switch to the enemy's perspective. The captain of the soldiers, Duke Thames, is quite fascinated by the fact that that idiot Roland actually decided to attack the capital. You see, the royal city has never been attacked in its 200-year history. No one has ever had the courage to challenge its mighty bluestone walls. So, to him, it's ridiculous that Roland would choose to attack despite being at such a disadvantage. With the enemy almost at the port, he addresses his soldiers. He orders them to relay his commands. He wants the 1st and 2nd Cavalry squads on standby behind the gate, with mercenaries stationed alongside them. The bastard is feeling pretty smug about their plan. They're convinced that Roland's forces won't stand a chance against the surprise they have in store, gunpowder buried beneath the ground, ready to be detonated. But then, as he observes the battlefield, he suddenly notices something odd. Roland's warship is leaving the fleet. Now that he thinks about it, he realizes something strange. Roland's warship doesn't have oars, which makes him wonder how the hell is that ship even sailing. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. No matter how strange their ships are, the Duke is sure that his enemies are going to die, though for some reason, they aren't docking at the port. For a moment, these overconfident bastards think that maybe, just maybe, the tiny civilian army managed to scare the shit out of Roland, and he's running for his life. And that's when our warship fires its first 150-55mm shell, obliterating everything where it lands. Those idiots have no clue what the hell just happened. Duke Thames assumes for a moment that the gunpowder they buried must have detonated by accident. But then, a soldier frantically reports that the attack came from the warship. Of course, the Duke gets annoyed. What the soldier is saying is completely bullshit. How the hell could a warship nearly a mile away launch an explosion like this? Before he can even process it, more devastating news arrives. The fuse locations have been destroyed. The bastard starts trembling. This means Timothy's ambush plan has completely tanked. At this point, he's certain that the enemy is going to reach the city walls. And then, another explosion erupts as the gunpowder buried beneath the ground ignites, wiping out all the soldiers standing nearby. They literally have no idea who is detonating the damn thing. And just when they think things couldn't get any worse, another bad report comes in. The main capital gate is in danger. The Duke is completely lost. How is this even possible when the enemy is still miles away? But we can clearly see that it's Roland's artillery who obliterated the gate. The soldiers stationed there are all smoked. At this point, the only thing running through their minds is that the enemy is downright diabolical. Panicking, the Duke quickly orders his soldiers to control the cavalry and not let them scatter. But before they can even react, something appears in the sky. A hot air balloon. Wendy doesn't waste a second before deploying one of the bombs. Lightning ensures the bomb lands in the perfect spot, and in an instant, it crashes down right over the main gate. The wall crumbles, burying the soldiers beneath it. In a matter of minutes, Roland's strategic prowess has completely wiped out the enemy's defenses, without even stepping foot on the port. Sylvie is somewhat horrified by all the destruction, and the enemy is now completely defenseless. But Nightingale believes that these shitheads deserve every bit of it. If the roles were reversed, the enemy wouldn't have been any less ruthless. But Prince Roland believes that no matter who wins, war always comes at a price. Right now, though, he has no time to brood over the horrors of war or the virtues of pacifism. This isn't just about survival. It's a battle for power, ideals, and most importantly, a war of eras. When an inferior era is replaced, it never fades quietly. Massive bloodshed is inevitable, and if someone has to suffer, Roland would rather it be his enemies than himself. With that, he orders his soldiers to sound the horns and take the city. Iron Axe and his 1st Army platoon are ready to comply. A while later, the entire city is in shambles. Our soldiers have infiltrated the streets, pushing deeper into enemy territory. Right now, they're facing mindless berserker-pilled soldiers. The platoon commander orders Squad 4 to retreat and instructs Squad 3 to stand by, ready to engage. Suddenly, an enemy soldier lunges forward and kills one of our men on the spot. Turns out, berserker soldiers were waiting in a nearby shack, lying in ambush. They launch a surprise attack, but as soon as our troops start firing, the tables turn fast. One of the soldiers grabs the heavy machine gun, unleashing a relentless barrage of bullets. The mindless bastards drop like flies. Once the massacre ends, the soldiers sweep the area, finishing off the last surviving berserker troops. Let's not forget the balloon, which is also wreaking havoc, dropping one bomb after another. Meanwhile, a soldier rushes into Timothy's chamber, where the so-called king sits slumped on his bed, completely devastated. The soldier reports that the enemy is at the castle gate. They need to escape before it's too late. But it looks like Timothy has already given up. He is lost in thought, remembering how his father ended his life right in this very room. His father had used his own death as a trap to kill Gerald, Timothy's greatest obstacle. That moment had given Timothy the opportunity to climb to the peak of power. In just